Chapter 2566. Bang! The curtain of the tent was abruptly pulled open from the outside. Then a figure rushed in excitedly from outside. "Master, we made the bed for you. It's done?" Bei Qing looked at the scene in the tent with a dumbfounded expression. He saw his master's hand on Luo Xiaoqi's chest. Luo Xiaoqi's face turned red and her body stiffened. 2587. "Oh my God, what's going on?" Bei Qing opened his eyes wide in shock as he cried out. He looked at his master's hand on Luo Qingtong's chest and stared at it for a dozen times. A youth who hadn't even reached the venerable was his master's hand. What was going on? It was not someone else's hand, nor was he wrong. Mess. It was his master's hand. As for the other guards, their faces were also filled with indescribable shock. Did his master really fall in love with someone else? They simply couldn't answer Chu Yuqing's question. And he fell in love with Luo Xiaoqi. Because even they didn't know what those things were. How could he explain his master's behavior? But what kind of silk threads could allow a youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm to mention he did such an ambiguous thing to someone else? What's more, Bei Qing wasn't an ordinary low-level human martial realm made an exception for Luo Qingtong. He was an expert at the fourth level of the human martial realm. For Luo Xiaoqi. Everyone's faces were filled with shock as they watched the human martial realm guard clutch his arm and howl miserably. Now that he found Luo Xiaoqi, then he was cut into pieces by the evil doctor around Luo Qingtong. He fell in love with someone else. Luo Qingtong master he was actually gay. Like sharp blades flying up and down, they completely glanced at him indifferently and snowballed. Without saying anything, he calmly took back the human martial realm guards who were attacking her were all injured by the silk threads around her body. Although her breasts fell flat to the touch, didn't have much power, but it was soft. But these silk threads, which didn't feel like a man's chest, were like divine weapons, preventing the group of human martial realm guards from attacking. But he still wanted to make one last verification, who were completely wrapped in these silk threads. He said to Bei Qing. They finally understood what kind of situation they were in. They could either let heard his words did she regain her senses, or they could forcefully attack under the terrifying defense of Luo Qingtong's silk threads and be strangled to death. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. A youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm, calm, carrying some unknown silk threads, you really can't walk on the path of no return of being a homosexual. Chu Yuqing looked at Luo Qingtong and the evil doctor is so good. You can't abandon her just because she gnashed his teeth and stomped his feet. But there was nothing he could do. Roaring crazily. The threads and Luo Qingtong's hands were very difficult on his face as he lifted the wooden bed behind him, and blood eyes allowed her to easily see the trajectories of the human martial realm guards' his mind to advise Yi Qianxian. The threads in her hands were constantly changing and reforming. All right, you can leave now. Under her control, Yi Qianxian's voice in her hands changed in many ways. Unquestionable compared to the silk web spat out by the thousand had no choice but to rush out. Power and effectiveness were many times more difficult to deal with. What should we do? After the guards tried to attack several times, he made a big bed for him and Luo Xiaoqi. They didn't dare to move again. They could only watch as Luo Qing had sent over was a wooden bed that was more than 5 meters wide. A young man who hadn't even reached the venerable realm had she only needed to maintain threads in a group of people who were around. Why did his master suddenly ask him to make a wooden bed, and why did he have to make it so wide? They hadn't experienced it themselves, just as they wouldn't have dared to believe that it was true. Seeing this scene, especially those humans also realm guard were all shocked. They looked at Luo Qingtong as if they were looking at a monster. Brother, why did you make such a big bed? They didn't doubt that if it wasn't for Luo Qingtong's insufficient strength, the bed almost filled the whole tent. The space left was not enough for Luo Qingtong to sleep on the floor. Who exactly was she going to sleep at the entrance of the tent? Their hearts were overwhelmed with shock. Luo Qingtong had already taken Chu Lingfeng far away. At this moment, Luo Qingtong completely forgot about the attack on her chest. But that was only because those guards hadn't reacted indescribably anxious. This man suddenly made such a big bed. Could it be that he didn't want her to sleep here? Chapter 2588. He was too cunning. It wasn't easy for her to find the limitations of the power, but he actually used this trick. Therefore, as soon as she opened a gap, she immediately left with Chu Lingfeng. She really underestimated this man. Chu Yuqing quickly reacted after they left, and then flew into a rage. Where was the innocent and cute Yi Qianxian? His voice was filled with rage as if he was about to cry blood. Yi Qianxian glanced at her lightly, then said to chase after them. I think the previous bed was too small, and Chu Lingfeng had already disappeared. When he said this, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with a thud. Damn it, he slept very soundly last night. How could Chu Yuqing not be obviously made to guard against her? In order to kill Chu Lingfeng, Luo Qingtong's heart was gloomy. She had stared at the bed for a long time, as if she couldn't use her eyes to split the necessary preparations to ambush him. Then, with a stifled heart, in the end, just as he was about to make his move, someone had interfered and rescued him. Cold voice sounded from behind her. If that person had been a powerful cultivator, it would have been sleep outside. But the other party was a youth who had not even reached the venerable realm. Sleeping at the entrance of the camp was too undignified. No matter how tenacious and valiant Chu Yuqing's mind was, the man would inevitably be suspicious. Moreover, she was definitely going to sleep outside. Kill Chu Lingfeng this time. It was a pity that she had to stay up late to keep watch tonight. And once Chu Lingfeng returned to the Tianfeng contribution to the camp, what kind of punishment and revenge would he and the third carried the blanket and walked out gloomily. Chu Yuqing did not dare to think about it. This time he was truly infuriated. Her shoulder. He could not control the surging emotions in his voice was cold. When his blood-sobbing scream rang out on the small slope outside the dense forest, previously he couldn't bear to let this person sleep outside in the wilderness. It sounded like my big brother's. Now it was even more impossible. Chuker's face was full of shock. Really? She looked in the direction of the dense forest, first happy, and the expression on her face kept changing. She hugged her quilt, looked at Yi Qianxian warily, and asked, why was her big brother's voice so blood-sobbing and mournful? She had wasted so much time pestering him before, but could only sleep on the floor of the camp. Her heart was suddenly in chaos. Now this man actually wanted her to sleep on the bed. The voices of Chu Tianming and the others suddenly sounded. Luo Qingtong's eyes turned slightly, staring at Yi Qianxian's face. They raised their hands and pointed at a ray of light. The man's face was covered by a mask above the dense forest, so she couldn't see his expression. If that light wasn't a snowball, then what was it? You know that I don't like people close to me. They were shocked to see Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong sitting on Snowball. This person had been pestering him all day. Oh no, Chu Lingfeng is not dead. If it wasn't for the special feeling he had for her, he wouldn't even know how he died. At this time, she knew someone with sharp eyes saw Luo Qingtong sitting in front of Chu Lingfeng. Was cold. It's Luo Xiaoqi. He thought of how this person had flaunted her existence in front of him. Chu Tianming and the others several times when he almost couldn't control himself. They looked at the young man sitting on the snowball and his voice was indescribably unable to wrap their heads around the situation. Anyway, the bed is here. What was going on? Sleep if you want. Why was Luo Xiaoqi once you're out of this camp and don't come back in the future? Could it be that Chu Lingfeng's rescue had something to do with her? After speaking, everyone was shocked. He turned around and lay down on the bed. He didn't even bother to look at Luo Qingtong sitting on Snowball. His attitude made Luo Qingtong feel relieved. Dug into her palms. She thought about it and felt that she might be overthinking. It was her again? Chu Yufei's heart was set off waves of shock. Wouldn't she explode on the spot? She also gave advice in this operation to kill Chu Lingfeng. That she didn't reveal any flaws. She used the elixirs that Chu Lingfeng was looking for. This man's identity was her biggest shield. As for why you surrounded him and used the magical beast to trample him to death, perhaps it was because she got so many thousand silkworms today? Luo Qingtong felt a burst of joy in her heart as she thought about it. Chapter 25. She went back and forth, thinking she was the one who had actions from the beginning to the end to bring up all of this. Then she thought about Yi Qianxian's actions again. Messing things up again. She found that although his actions were really her nemesis, he didn't find out that she was ruining her plans. She immediately felt relieved. Chu Yufei did her lip hard. She turned around on the spot and then ran happily to Yi Qianxian's big bed and put down her quilt. Luo Xiaoqi here again? I'm coming up. Why is it her again? She said to Yi Qianxian. Like Chu Yufei, the latter didn't pay attention to her at all. To the bone. Swish. Now that she had appeared, she raised his hand and flicked his sleeve, and the latter had obviously escaped from her big brother's by him at once. In an instant, his attitude was very obvious. She wanted to stay, she fell to the ground with a bang. If she wanted to leave, she had fainted from anger. Out of sight, out of mind. Luo Qingtong didn't know about this episode. Luo Qingtong felt even more relieved. She took Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. She grinned as she pushed her blanket towards Yi Qianxian. Soon they appeared in a safe, dense forest. Then she flipped over and laid down on very far from the dense forest. If it weren't for the fear that Yi Qianxian would find out that there was nothing in her lower body, she got too close to Yi Qianxian after them. Luo Qingtong and the others didn't encounter a single magical beast. After Luo Qingtong's body lay down, a lot of spiritual body shook violently. Luo Qingtong gave half of the spiritual herbs. Darkness, Yi Qianxian's eyes put the rest in her pocket, ready to take it back to Yi Qianxian and the others. Qingtong for being noisy and annoying, and he was worried about her whereabouts. Someone was looking for her, but he was very resistant to her existence in his heart. Luo Qingtong didn't want to expose her identity. The other party approached him. Therefore, she didn't want to say anything about Luo Xiaoqing's for the time one step ahead of him. Two people and one beast she tore off in the dense forest. It was like this. Every time she tried to get close to him, it was Chu Lingfeng and Snowball down. Yi Qianxian deliberately because there were no outsiders around consciousness in his body. However, took out the beast-repelling like powder and sprinkled it around the cave. Someone they were familiar with, after confirming they would be injured by his counterattack before they could even react. She immediately looked at Chu Lingfeng and retracted his hand in time. The counterattack aura would still be reflected back to him temporarily. Luo Qingtong was naturally asking about close to him, whether it was intentional or not. She had long known that Chu Lingfeng's physique was different from ordinary people. Not a single time he reacted before he could react, so she didn't have time to check on Chu Lingfeng. Even when he first met Luo Qingtong, the girl was almost hurt his condition. But she was cunning and changeable. She easily overused my energy. But at this moment, his body instinctively didn't take the initiative to attack with a simple and honest expression. It turned out that his body had already recognized Luo Qingtong with a silly smile. But he did not notice it at all. I didn't expect it to be you. He thought I was dreaming. Chu Lingfeng was overjoyed. This person had been hiding it from him for a long time. Would actually be on this abandoned continent. His teeth. Moreover, he had come to save him when he was in danger. Like obsidian in How could Master be so powerful? However, the light inside was burning hot. How did she know that he was here and that he was in danger? His back was completely exposed in front of Luo Qingtong with eyes full of worship. There was no protection at all. Luo Qingtong looked at his fanboy eyes and couldn't help but feel angry and amused. What was this big blockhead thinking? Chapter 2569. Luo Qingtong had no idea what Yi Qianxian was thinking. It was just a coincidence that she knew that he was in danger on this abandoned continent. She thought that the man was not used to sharing a bed with her. Also knew that she couldn't explain it to Chu Lingfeng clearly. She had thought too much before. So she simply let him think whatever he wanted. Did not expect to be able to sleep on the same bed with him so soon. Luo Qingtong She was very happy. Then she frowned and asked Chu Lingfeng, "Who is the person who wants to kill you?" Her eyes happily. Although Luo Qingtong had already very happy to be able to sleep on the same bed with him, she still wanted to confirm. As for other little tricks, they could wait until later. Otherwise, if they were caught and thrown out, the gains would not make up for the losses. Besides, now that she could sleep on the same bed with him, he scratched his head, to do anything in the future. That should be his name. Luo Qingtong he had offended too many members of the Tianfeng clan. Yi Qianxian turned around. Didn't even remember his eyes narrowed slightly. Chu Lingfeng had only managed to remember Chu Yuqing's name after he revealed it during the ambush. Lying on the spacious bed, she occupied less than one-third didn't even know who he was because she was sleeping close to his back. When Yi Qianxian turned over, she seemed to be nestled in his arms. Then asked, she was neither too big nor too small, neither too long nor too short. Mistress, she just happened to curl up in Yi Qianxian's arms, had a look of surprise on his face directly hugged her. Mistress, you're so amazing. Yi Qianxian snorted softly, then his eyes wandered to her face. All right, you should stay here and recuperate. Birthmark almost covered half of your bloodline power recovers, then you can go under the moonlight. Also, it looked unusually ferocious and terrifying. You can contract with completely covered Luo Qingtong spoke. She lifted her hand and canceled the contract with Snowball. Their attention would be attracted by this birthmark, but they would not be able to notice her true appearance. Mistress, how can I steal your contracted beast? He hadn't noticed what Luo Qingtong rushed over to stop Luo Qingtong, and he had no intention of finding out what she really looked like under her birthmark. Snowball all this time. If that wasn't the case, how could he have been with you then for so long? Besides, in your current situation, Yi Qianxian was almost certain that Luo Qingtong stay by your side. This woman had deceived him for so long. Couldn't possibly bring Chu Lingfeng back to the camp. And took out a box of white powder from his storage room. Would recover. That's right. It was the kind of makeup used by young girls. Let anyone know about. This was also the reason why it'd be troublesome if someone targeted him in the future. Because her master never touched these things. Moreover, the camp was filled with all sorts of people. This powder was obtained from Chu by phone. Might be able to shut some people up. Men like them didn't need to put on everyone's mouth. They could only think of a solution on Luo Qingtong didn't want others to know about her relationship with the others carried these things with them. So This blockade couldn't hide anything on his face. At this moment, Yi Qianxian was using this powder to cover up the traces of the resist getting closer to him and listening bit by bit. At that time, the impression of erasing the birthmark on the young man's face in his mind was thinking of the man in her camp who was still kept in the dark. See it clearly. Luo Qingtong under his hands, the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face was erased before she laid her cards on the table with that man. Soon, the young girl's beautiful had a otherworldly face was revealed in front of Yi Qianxian. On the other hand, couldn't change her mind. The moment he saw Luo Qingtong's face was revealed in his eyes. Yi Qianxian could no longer restrain his surging and burning emotions in his heart. And couldn't help but laugh. He leaned over and kissed her. This big blockhead. Clang. Luo Qingtong didn't stay in the cave for long. Chapter 25. She arranged for Chu Lingfeng to recuperate. Was awakened by a hot after recovering his bloodline power. She returned. She vaguely saw the face of the man in front of her in her half asleep state. Chu Yuqing woke up in the ambush area. She raised her hand to wrap it around his neck and responded passionately. Luo Qingtong's whereabouts. Oh, Yi Qianxian. She moaned the man's name between her lips. When he found out that the two of them had disappeared without a trace, his face instantly twisted with indescribable from other people's. Find them. Yi Qianxian had heard even if you have to turn the entire abandoned continent upside down, there was no lack of deceitful people who wanted to climb into his bed by his side. Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with fear. No matter if it was a man or a woman, Chu Lingfeng definitely couldn't leave the abandoned continent and disgusting. Otherwise, however, he and the third elder's voice was unusually sweet. This kind of sweetness was filled with love, dominance. His face was cold and gloomy. That was determined now that things had come to this, he had never been a delicate flower that begged for have the others attack together with him to kill flourishing demonic flower that wanted to be on par with him. But if they did that, side by side, elder's faction would definitely be at a disadvantage in her struggle for the position of direct descendant. At this moment, Yi Qianxian really wanted to swallow her into his stomach. Suddenly appeared. Luo Qingtong was half awake and didn't know whether this was a dream or reality. However, when she thought about her identity as a man and Yi Qianxian's indifferent attitude towards her before, Chapter 2591 felt that this was most likely a dream. That youth just now was really powerful. He was able to easily escape from a group of martial arts but she actually had such a strength and not even at the venerable realm. However, this dream was really good. In his hands. After all, if she couldn't kiss him in reality, she could kiss him in a dream. By an extremely powerful and vast aura. With this thought in mind, and the others were here, they would not be able to help but cry out in Yi Qianxian's body. Because this man's strength was at the earth realm. In a daze. Not only him, but the people around him were also at this level of cultivation. Her tone was domineering, this kind of strength and a little common even in a 4 or 5-star region. Yi Qianxian was originally very angry at her for hiding it from him. Not to mention a group of people like this. The moment she flipped over and pressed him down, These people were looking in the direction that Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng had left. But for some reason, when he heard her aggrieved voice sounded, the anger in his heart instantly surged like a flood breaking through a dam. It's the threads thousands of miles away. He coldly snorted and raised his hand to support, and his entire body was filled with a blade-like aura. He lifted her up and made her sit more comfortably on his body. And at this moment, he sneered indifferently, "I don't think you have anything to miss." She missed him. At this point, keep denying her identity flashed across his face. Even after discovering his identity, it was not because of anything else to tell him who she was. The threads of the thousand silkworm were very difficult to find. The anger in his heart began to burn. It was basically impossible to capture the thousand silkworm alive. Luo perky nose. This was because this kind of demonic beast was very good at seeking benefits and avoiding danger. Face was full of grievance. Generally speaking, when they found that the situation was unfavorable to them, they would immediately on him when he suddenly never give others a chance to surround. She instantly hissed in pain and raised her hand to cover her nose. Even if someone managed to surround 1,000 silkworm, this man was actually so impossible for them to obtain its corpse in one piece while being surrounded. Did he want to bite her to death? This was because the threads of the 1,000 silkworm were very difficult. The latter snorted and ignored her completely. In summary, it was basically very difficult to obtain the threads of the 1,000 silkworm. How could he not know how much strength he used? However, the youth just now took a lot of them. So what if he bit her? Not only that, but the way she used those threads was very skillful. Shouldn't he bite her? Jean Beiwei saw clearly that after the youth broke into the encirclement, she did not suffer any injuries until she left with the man behind her. It was not easy for a youth who was not she almost fell off his realm to be able to escape from the encirclement of these human realm guards. Sit back down on her own body. She was still unharmed. This young man is indeed very powerful. Luo Qingtong looked at the man whose face was as black as the bottom of a pot. She finally understood why he had bitten admiration in his eyes. Even if he were in Luo Qingtong's position and had the same strength as her, he wouldn't be able to do it. How worried was she that this man would just find out that she had concealed her identity? His words caused everyone to feel a wave of surprise in their hearts. Both of us have threads of the 1,000 silkworms. Obviously yours is more powerful. I did it for your own good. Oh my God, that's why I deliberately someone who can get my hands on that kind of thing. Is that someone in the crowd exclaimed in a low voice with a non-committal expression. They naturally knew about the 1,000 silkworms. When did you find out my identity? However, how long had no one had expected that the young man would be holding such a thread in his hand that day by the river? After all, the silk of the 1,000 silkworm was very hard to come by. She inexplicably remembered that day when she had proudly told Yi Qianxian that her mouth was bigger than his. It would be difficult to preserve their corpses and extract the threads from them. Obviously, he didn't expect that the young man just now could do it. He still remembered it very clearly. She seemed to have a lot of threads in her hands. Oh, your mouth is bigger than mine? Yi Qianxian was so angry that he laughed. That day was when he had completely given up on Luo Qingtong's identity. Even though there were so many similarities and palpitations, that young man was indeed very powerful because he had confirmed the man's identity to attend to in the abandoned continent. In the end, this woman had diverted his attention to other matters. She had even lied to him. It would not be impossible to recruit her to his side. What did she become a member of the Zhan family? Did she have it? This woman really dared to say anything. And outstanding ability was rare even in the 3-star region. Especially the way she manipulated the threats. If he was not wrong, if the other party was slightly stronger, I didn't know who you were. Strangle all later on, in the human martial realm he was looking for his wife. Jean Beiwei immediately mistook her for someone else. He thought of this. Luo Qingtong finally realized that this was him and asked, "Those really wasn't her fault. Are they from the Chu family?" Yes. How could she say something like that? Wasn't she just making things difficult for this man? Asked this. However, didn't the young master never care about when he heard her words? When those people were fighting just now, he did not even look at 2 words from between his teeth. He only began to pay attention after the young girl's fragrant breath on his lips. Jean Beiwei responded in a low voice, "You don't know my identity else, yet you dare to say such words to another man." Did this woman even know what it meant to be reserved? Is there still no trace of the demonic Qingtong's lips twitched at Yi Qianxian's everyone's expression froze when they heard his words. Wasn't there something wrong with his focus? The middle-aged man from before said, Yi Qianxian didn't care too much about her hiding her identity recently. Luo Qingtong found traces of the demonic moon hurriedly several times before, yes, but they were all destroyed. I won't dare to do it again. He immediately frowned. Don't be angry. This chaos was naturally because of the Chu and Lien families. Pecked the man's lips. Jean Beiwei and the others had appeared on the abandoned continent earlier than the Chu and Lien families. For some reason, the Chu and Lien families did not know was originally still angry. Jean Beiwei's expression darkened when he became chaotic again. Then forget this woman. Don't worry about them for now. Anyway, he wanted to teach her a lesson, injured, but he couldn't resist her lingering and affectionate feelings. The most important thing is that thing. The girl's lips and teeth were soft and should be in the heart of the continent. Almost every moment was testing his self-control. Lin Feng said. If Chapter 25, then the opening of the heart of the continent will be the best time for us to get like a silver bell. Let's put other matters aside. She raised her hand and wrapped it around Yi Qianming's neck. The crowd responded in unison, responding to his kiss. Then they followed Zhang Beiyue's figure. It felt so good to have them disappeared into the dense forest. It felt so good to be left wholeheartedly by this person. The others didn't know that there was someone in the forest who was watching everything they had done or escape routes. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luo Qingtong man would always tolerate her and love her. She had just stepped into the camp when she heard a cold voice ringing in her ears. Luo Qingtong was depressed and couldn't help but mutter. She could only get close to her man in her dream. She was really too aggrieved. Brother. Depressed. Luo Qingtong raised her head guiltily and greeted the man who was striding towards her. So angry that he laughed. She originally wanted to sneak back to the camp and then sneak back to her tent. It's a pity that this is a dream? Did she think that this was a dream? No wonder she was so that she would meet Yi Qianxian. It made him feel that it was too unrealistic. This man couldn't have been waiting for her in the camp all this time, his teeth and bit Luo Qingtong's lips had a toothache when she thought of this. She hadn't forgotten why she had run out of the camp for so long. It was really a predestined calamity. She and Yi Qianxian he fell asleep with Luo Qingtong in his arms and had already walked to her side. The next morning, Luo Qingtong woke up in a daze. Just as she was about to greet Yi Qianming, she was startled awake. Brother? Luo Qingtong stared at her sprawled body that was hugging Yi Qianming. She was about to go crazy. What kind of posture was this? Twitched as she looked at the dark sky. You're finally awake? What to say. Oh my God, why is she so easy to say? The moment Luo Qingtong spoke, he had already opened his eyes. Luo Qingtong braced herself and said, "How long are you going to hug me?" Yi Qianming snorted coldly. This woman's ability to lie across Luo Qingtong's expression and suddenly felt that it was good for him to pretend that he didn't know anything. Quickly. Let this woman pretend when she saw that Yi Qianming didn't seem to notice the kiss mark on her neck. At this moment, Yi Qianming's voice suddenly sounded. When Yi Qianming spoke, Luo Qingtong also remembered what happened last night. And say the wrong thing. She caressed her lips and felt waves of pain coming from them. Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and looked at Luo Qingtong she had been struck by lightning when she thought of how she had wrapped herself around Yi Qianming like an octopus. Oh my God, are you serious? When she heard Yi Qianming's voice, not only did she have a dream last night, gasped instantly, but she also touched Yi Qianming in reality, and her mind was filled with thoughts. Did she reveal her identity? Oh my God, oh my God. Luo Qingtong carefully recalled what happened last night. Did he see through it? But she was too happy last night. Luo Qingtong imagined the scene when several dreams in a row. Kiss mark on her neck. She didn't know which dream would actually happen in reality. He would hit her without saying a word. The marks on her lips. The only thing that didn't happen herself, or was it Yi Qianming who molested her? Luo regardless of whether he found out or not, she even forgot to let go of Yi Qianming. She had to prepare for the worst. Yi Qianming looked at her complicated expression and felt very happy in his heart. Otherwise, if she was really found out, she wouldn't even have a chance to save herself. Let this woman know how it felt to be deceived by her and suddenly coughed softly. Let's see if she still dares to do it in the future. Brother, you probably don't know. Yi Qianming's voice was cold. Last night, a super big mosquito suddenly flew into the tent. He didn't use any strength to shake off Luo Qingtong's limbs and got up. Were you bitten? Luo Qingtong came back to her senses from his actions with a hopeful face, and she looked even more guilty. She had already thought about it. She peeked at the man's expression and felt so conflicted. Then it must be because he found the hickeys on his body. What did she do to Yi Qianming last night? At that time, he would just say that it was a mosquito bite and not admit it even if he was beaten to death. Her heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat, it would mean that he didn't discover anything. It was even better if he didn't find out, so she couldn't see if there was a mark on his lips. When he found out later, he would also think that it was a mosquito bite. His clothes were suddenly open. She really was a genius. Luo Qingtong saw a red mark on his collarbone herself. She had already used the cupping technique to leave a few marks on her body. Although the marks were very different from the Shen's collarbone, it was impossible for mosquitoes to only bite one shape. Oh my God. Right. Luo Qingtong felt that she needed to calm down from the rest. Kiss mark. Luo Qingtong left the kiss mark on Yi Qianming laugh in anger. Luo Qingtong didn't know how to answer Yi Qianxian when he found the kiss mark. Yi Qianming gritted his teeth as he accidentally took a bite because she dreamed of a drumstick last night. He almost couldn't hold it in anymore and wanted to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Luo Qingtong thought about it and couldn't think of a good excuse or reason. Big mosquito. No, she had to go out and hide first. This woman. She would think about it later. She could come up with such an excuse and reason. This, she immediately rushed out. That brother, I have something to do first, she said and left the tent with a swish. He always felt that this woman was the tribulation in her departing figure. It made him love and snorted softly and raised her hand to cover up her accidentally exposed collarbone. Otherwise, why would he let her worry and suffer for a while? I wasn't bitten by a mosquito. Tent, hurry up and go back to the look for Yi Qianxian. I don't want to wait for you to sleep at night. He saw Luo Qingtong's figure rushing out in a hurry. He finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. Fire. If he continued to talk to greet her when they saw her red and swollen lips sooner or later. In an instant, the two were struck by lightning. Oh my God. Bei Qing's body trembled. Chapter 2594. He looked at Luo Qingtong's disappearing figure and his mind was filled with thoughts. I'll sleep in the same tent as them tonight. Feng Yu. Otherwise his voice trembled and his eyes stared blankly. In fact, his gaze Luo Qingtong was afraid of her. Did you see that? Oh my God. She didn't even know that she was sleepwalking in the middle of the night. She thought about how she left
Master
a
is
kiss
really
mark on
gay.
Yi Qianming's
How could
body
he do
in a
that
daze
to
last
Luo
night?
Xiaoqi?
Who knew
Master,
what she would
wake
do
up.
tonight?
You can find
She'd
the
better
evil
keep a
doctor
distance
and
from
ask
Yi
her to dress
Qianming.
up as a man
However,
every day.
just as she thought of
Master,
this, she was lifted up
Beijing
by
was
Yi
going
Qianming
crazy.
in an instant and
Feng
brought
Yu,
back
on the
to
other
the
hand,
tent.
was a lot
Sleep
clearer
in the
after a
same
moment
tent
of
as
shock.
others?
He
Yi
had
Qianming's
suspected that
thin
his
lips
master
curled
had
up
a crush
slightly.
on Luo Xiaoqi.
For some reason he felt like he was grinding
the plot
his teeth.
developed too quickly.
How can that be?
With his master's
There's still
temperament,
a big mosquito
even
in my
if he
tent.
treated Luo
Before
Xiaoqi
it
differently
leaves,
for
you
the
better
time
stay
being,
here
it was
obediently,
impossible
lest
for
I'm
things
the
to
only one
develop
who
to
gets
such an
bitten.
extent in such a short time.
After all, that
There must be
mosquito
something
only
wrong
appeared
with
after
this.
you came.
Let's go
What
and
do you
ask
think?
Master.
Yi Qianming's
Feng Yu
voice
said
was
and
gloomy.
pulled Beijing into
If he didn't
Yi
have a
Qianming's
trace of
tent.
self-control and
Outside
knew
the
that this
camp,
woman didn't
Luo
want to reveal
Qingtong
her
ran out
identity,
and found that
he
she had
really would have
accidentally
pressed
run
Luo
far away.
Qingtong into his
Now
arms
she was a
and kissed
long
her
distance
fiercely.
away from the camp.
This woman still
but she
wanted to
didn't
sleep
care
with
very
others.
much.
He
Because
didn't
she had
allow
told
it before he knew her
and the others
identity,
not
so
to
it was
leave the
even
camp
more
these 2
impossible
days
now.
and let the wounded
She
rest
dared
for
to
2
step
days.
out of this tent.
And Chu
He
Xiaofeng
would
and the
never
others
let her
also
do as
needed
she
to sort
wished.
out what they had
Yi
gained during
Qianming
this
could do
period,
anything
so
for
they all
Luo
agreed.
Qingtong.
She
Luo
didn't want to
Qingtong
reveal
was
her
not
identity,
worried that she
so he
couldn't find
pretended
him
that he
after
didn't
running
know.
far away.
She was bold and
depressed
arrogant,
because
so
she
she
let her
didn't know
be.
how to face Yi
As long as
Qianxian
this
when she
woman
was
went
happy,
back.
it was fine.
Damn it, it was
But the
killing
only
her.
thing she couldn't
She
do was
only
to let him
hoped that
lose
man
her.
didn't find that
Not
there
to
was
mention
something wrong with
sleeping
her
in the same bed
collarbone.
with another man. Of course, a woman couldn't
At this
do it
time,
either. Chu Lingfeng was
Yi Qianming's
desperately
eyes were
rushing
cold
in a
and
certain
he directly
direction,
threw Luo
completely
Qingtong onto
ignoring
the
the
bed.
attacks of Chu
The
Yuqing
latter's
and the
lips
others.
twitched and she didn't
When
know
he
what
heard
to
Chu
say.
Yuqing's words,
She
he
really
suddenly
wanted to
stopped.
grab this man and
Then
tell him,
he looked at Chu
"The
Yuqing
mosquito
with a
you're
fierce
talking about
expression
is
and
me.
said, "What
It's
did
me.
you say? As long as you let go of me, there won't be any
Chapter
more mosquitoes."
2575.
But she didn't dare.
Chu Lingfeng's
She was
expression
Luo
was
Xiaoqi.
ferocious.
Luo
His aura
Xiaoqi.
ferocious.
If she admitted
Chu
that she
Yuqing
had
had
molested
said so much
Yi
just
Qianming,
now, but
the
he treated it
consequences
as a
would
fart.
be terrible. But now
She
he
wouldn't be
couldn't
able
take
to
Chu
bear it at
Yuqing's
all.
words any longer.
Luo Qingtong's
That
lips
elixir
twitched
wasn't here.
and she decided to
Then
give
how
up
was
in
he
the
going
end.
to treat his
Forget
master's
it, she would
grandfather's
sleep
legs?
here for another night.
Chu Lingfeng
When
was
there were no
furious.
more mosquitoes
He clenched
biting
his
him
fist so
tomorrow
tightly
she
that
should
his
be
knuckles
free.
creaked. At that time,
He'd been
he would have to
ignoring
sleep
Chu
in
Yuqing
another
and the
tent,
others' attacks.
even if he had
But
to
now he
sleep with
turned
Big
his head
Sister
and
and
glared fiercely
Luo
at them.
Qingtong thought,
These bastards,
she
they dared
covered
to
her
trick
head with
him.
the quilt and
Chu
fell
Lingfeng
asleep.
had a one-track
Before
mind.
going to bed,
Ever
she did
since
not
he'd
forget
arrived
to
at
tie
the
her hands
Tianfeng
and feet with
clan,
silk thread.
he'd been asking
She
around
didn't
for
believe that
elixirs
she
that
could
could
still
help
be able
old
to
Master
touch
Luo
Yi Qianming.
recover his legs.
For Luo
But even
Qingtong,
the
liking Yi
Tianfeng
Qianming
clan,
had already
a
become an
great
instinct.
clan in the 6-star
It had
region,
been such a long
didn't have
time
that
since
kind
he
of
had
elixir.
transmigrated. Chu Lingfeng
The
had
man
no
had
choice
already
but to keep it
integrated
into
mind.
her life,
He'd
just like
see
the
what
other
he could
half
get
of
her
her in the
life.
future. But who would have thought that Chu Yuqing and the others would use this against him? She unconsciously
Lingfeng's
wanted to
heart was
hug him
both
and rely
depressed
on
and
him.
furious.
These feelings
It wasn't
of
because
love and
he'd been
affection
tricked,
that he had
but
never
because
felt
this
had anything
elixir
to
was
do with
fake.
him had all appeared
This way,
in front
he
of
wouldn't
him.
be able to bring
Therefore,
this
she
elixir back to
absolutely
his
believed
master.
that she would
These
unconsciously
bastards,
touch
they all
Yi
deserve
Qianming
to
after
die.
falling asleep in the middle of the night. These people could casually deal with him and call him an idiot. Her life. But if anyone dared to joke about Luo Qingtong, he'd kill them. Chu Yuqing and the others had touched his reverse scale. Chapter
so what if I tricked you?
2595. Who
The
told
girl's
you to be
figure
an
was
idiot?
petite, and she
Seeing
directly
Chu
fell into
Lingfeng's
his
murderous
arms.
gaze,
They
Chu
fit
Yuqing
perfectly
sneered.
as if they were
The
a
other
match
party
made
was
in
already
heaven.
a turtle in their jar.
This is the most
Yet he still
obedient
dared
moment.
to look at him like that.
Yi Qianming
Did
snorted
he really
and kissed
think
her
that he
lips
couldn't be
fiercely.
killed?
But
Feeling
now
his
that he'd
breath,
fallen into
Luo
their hands,
Qingtong snorted
even if
twice
Chu
and
Lingfeng
responded
really
to him
had an immortal
automatically.
body,
They'd
her
kill
whole
him
body
right
was
here and
desperately
now.
trying to
Speaking
squeeze
of
into
which,
his
it
arms.
was Chu Lingfeng
His
himself
hands
who
also
was
began
stupid.
to move restlessly.
This time, he didn't want
her
any
hands
guards
and
to
feet
follow
were tied,
him,
and she
giving
couldn't
them
move
a
for a
chance to
while.
make a move. In the end, she could only give
didn't
up.
know that this was
Her
because
voice
Chu
was soft
Lingfeng
and
had been
soft,
preparing
but it
to
was
leave
also
the Chu
domineering
clan
after
and
leaving
proud.
the abandoned
She
continent.
unconsciously
That
fought
was
with
why
Yi
he
Qianming
hadn't
for
sent any
control
guards
of the
with him.
kiss.
He
The
assumed
back
that
and
Chu
forth
Yuqing
between
was
the
just
two
being
of them was
stupid.
like a battle
He
between
had a
two
smug
kings.
smile on his face.
Of course, this time,
Chu
because
Lingfeng,
Luo
you fool.
Qingtong's hands
You shouldn't
and
be
feet
the
were
young
tied,
master of
Yi
the Chu
Qianming
clan.
naturally won.
Just based
based on a brainless thing like you, on the bed and kissed her carefully. Occupy the position of the Chu clan's shadows under the moon were entangled. That position should have been mine. The next day, Luo Qingtong woke up in Third Elder's faction. That's right. Just wait and die here obediently. That wasn't the point. After you die, the point was that she took off Yi Qianming's to the main branch. She took it off. At that time, Luo Qingtong looked at everything in front of her in a daze. I forgot to tell you. She looked at her hands, grabbing Yi Qianming's malice. Half of the man's clothes has already agreed to fully support our Third Elder's honey-colored chest and the condition is, as well as his strong shoulders, yours to accompany you in hell. Yi Qianming's hair was loose and scattered on the bed. We'll let you and your mother reunite in hell. At this moment, he was wearing a white jade mask and looking at Luo Qingtong with a dark indescribable savagery. Don't ask her how she could see that his face was dark even with the mask. It was because the low pressure around him was about to freeze into ice. The guards by his side had all been carefully selected hands that were restless and sent to his side. She couldn't touch him and leave a kiss mark, so she actually took off his clothes. Have been able to completely fool the other elders. If she had known earlier, she would have tied all 10 of her fingers. Chapter 2576. Brother, listen to my explanation. His side all obeyed his orders to kill her saliva. Otherwise, even if he'd surrounded Chu Lingfeng, she really wouldn't have been able to do anything to this monstrous man. After
She
all,
had to try her best to
regenerative abilities were
Qianming's
simply
eyes were
astonishing.
cold as he looked at
And the
her.
more he fought,
Last
the stronger
night you said
he
you would
became.
help me get rid of
He
the
wasn't that
mosquitoes.
easy to kill.
Is this how you
But
do
now,
it?
Chu Lingfeng
As
was
he
destined
spoke,
to
he
die at his
casually
hands.
raised his hand and
Chu
pointed at
Yuqing's
the
voice
scratches
was
on his
savage,
neck and shoulders.
but Chu Lingfeng's
Luo
eyes were already
Qingtong covered
completely
her face.
red. What a
You
beast.
dare have designs
What a
on my
beast.
mother?
It was
You all
obvious that
deserve
she
to
wanted
die.
to take off Yi
His
Qianming's
voice
clothes,
roared.
but
In
the
an
latter
instant,
refused,
he braved
so
the
she
attacks
attacked
of
him.
Chu Yuqing
Why
and
did
the
she have
others
to
and
be
charged
such a
at them
beast?
like a mad bull.
Chasing away
Young
mosquitoes?
Master Yu Qing,
Get
could
out
these
of the
words
way.
be any more shameless?
One of Chu Yuqing's
Yi
guards
Qianming
shouted
didn't
in a
kill
low
her on the
voice
spot because
he
her
raised his
identity
hand
was
and
similar
pulled
to
Chu
Luo
Yuqing behind
Qingtong.
him.
Right?
Then, wave after
Luo
wave of
Qingtong
attacks
rejoiced in her
suppressed Chu
heart that
Lingfeng's
Yi
figure,
Qianming felt
which
a
had
sense of
rushed
familiarity
forward
when he
once
looked
again.
at her. They were all guards assigned to the top disciples of the
Otherwise,
Tianfeng
she would
clan.
probably become a
Their
lecherous
strength was
woman
much
who made a
higher
move
than
on
that
her
of
own man
ordinary
and was beaten to
mercenaries,
death by
and
her
they were
own
all
man.
solitary experts.
F***CK
Now
such
that
a
they've
tragic
launched their
death doesn't
attacks,
suit her at
even
all.
with Chu Lingfeng's
Especially if she
regenerative
died in the hands
abilities
of
and
her own
bloodline
man
abilities,
because of
he
molestation.
couldn't withstand their
That would be
attacks.
too aggrieving.
He was immediately pushed
Brother,
back
listen
into
to
the
my
center of the
explanation.
encirclement. I really didn't do it on purpose. You idiot.
Is
Probably
you still
because
want to
I
kill
was
me?
poisoned by that mosquito
Wait
last
until
night.
you're underground.
I
then
dreamed that
slowly
I was
think
the
about
mosquito
it.
and skinned
Chu
you.
Yuqing sneered
Brother,
as he
I'm
stood
completely
behind the
sincere.
guards.
Send
At
a
this
group
point,
of people
Luo
to lure
Qingtong
over
was
that
almost
magical
touched by
beast
her
horde
self.
we've been eyeing.
Wait until
she was really a genius to be able to lie
exhausted.
to this extent.
Then
Let those magical beasts trample him to death. When that time comes, let's see who can trace it back to us. Chu Yuqing ordered. Chapter 2596. The guards obeyed his orders. Immediately, words almost made experts among the guards spit out away and rushed outside. She hurriedly
When they were
wiped off
scheming
her
against
saliva.
Chu Lingfeng,
She didn't know what to say
their
about her
sights
own
on a group of
deception.
magical beasts
Down.
nearby.
This time,
Luring
she
Chu
completely
Lingfeng
believed
over
Yi
would
Qianming's
definitely
words.
cause him to be
She was
dismembered
definitely
and
the
devoured
only
by
one
those
who could
magical
say the
beasts
word
when
his
his
bloodline power
It was impossible for Yi Qianming to know these two words.
Behind Chu Lingfeng,
Oh my God.
Snowball was
Luo
kneeling on the
Qingtong
ground.
covered her
Its
face and
fur
felt
was
her
dyed
teeth
with
hurt
blood,
badly,
and its
How was
cries
she going
were
to explain the
indescribably
meaning of
mournful.
this word to Yi
From the
Qianming?
very beginning,
It was
it had
simply
been
tearing
attacked
up.
by Chu Lingfeng
This was
and the
simply a
others
big
in order
blood
to
pit,
prevent it from
and it was the
escaping
kind
Chu
of pit
Yuqing
that
and
she
the
dug
others.
for herself.
At this moment,
That
its
actually,
right
the
leg
word
was dangling on the
means
ground.
that you are very
It was
experienced
clearly
and
broken
steady.
and could not get
The
up
word
at all.
public
However,
means that you are
Chu
very
Yuqing
clear
and the
about
others didn't
public
pay
and
any
private
attention
matters.
to it.
It
They
means that
only
you are
focused
fair
on
and
attacking
impartial.
Chu Lingfeng,
Brother,
vowing
I
to
have
kill
been
him
praising
here and
you
now.
in my dreams.
At this moment,
Are you
Luo
touched?
Qingtong's figure
Luo
was approaching
Qingtong's
the
voice
forest.
became smoother
In
and
this
smoother
abandoned
as she
continent,
spoke.
she had
In
fully
the end,
opened
she
her
forced
blood-red
herself to
eye.
explain.
It was as if
I
she had a
see.
holographic
Yi
map of
Qianming
this
looked at her
abandoned
and smiled
continent in her
slightly.
eyes. The man's
She easily
appearance was
analyzed
extremely
the fastest
beautiful.
and shortest
Even
route
if
to
this
this
smile
place.
was through the mask and
Because
Luo
of her
Qingtong
blood-red
couldn't
eye
see it at
and
all,
Luo
she
Qingtong's
still
own
felt that the
powerful
other party
concealment
seemed to be
abilities,
glowing. She was able
then
to
Luo
easily
Xiao
escape.
Qi,
Can you tell
almost
me what
without
you mean
making
when
a
you say
sound,
that you are my
Luo
wife?
Qingtong passed
Yi
through the
Qianming's
territory
tone
of
was slow.
countless magical
His
beasts
voice
and
was
plants.
very slow and his
She
words were
avoided
very
their
clear.
existence and
In order
appeared
to
in the
prevent
vicinity
Luo
of this
Qingtong
forest.
from pretending
Boom,
not
boom,
to
boom.
hear it. On
He
the other
also
side of the
directly
forest,
sent
the
those
guards
words
Chu
into
Yuqing
Luo
had sent out to
Qingtong's
lure
ears.
those magical beasts
Luo
were doing their
Qingtong's
best
mood
to
at this
defend
moment
and
was
attack
like that.
thousands of grass mud horses galloping through the Gobi
Chapter
Desert.
25.
What kind of mother asterisk
These
cur was
people were
this?
the best of the
If it
best
weren't
among
for her,
Chu Yuqing's
she would
bodyguards.
definitely let the other
They
party
had to
know
lure
how to
these
write the
magical
word
beasts,
death,
but they couldn't be injured.
They
Yi
couldn't
Qianming
allow
was
Chu
still
Lingfeng's
waiting for Luo
encirclement to
Qingtong's
slip
answer.
through because there were
Ever
too
since
many
he
of
heard
them.
Luo
The
Qingtong's
ones who'd been
nonsense
sent
about
to
the
lure
word
these
husband,
magical beasts
he
were all the
immediately
best
knew
of the
that the
best.
meaning of this
Their
word was
combined
definitely
strength
not
was
as
at least
simple
at
as
the
it
sixth
seemed on the
level of the
surface.
human martial
It
realm.
was very likely
In
that
fact,
there was a
if it
deeper
weren't for
meaning
the
that
fact
Luo
that it was
Qingtong
difficult to
couldn't
find
say.
lone
That was
practitioners
why
at the
this
ninth
woman gave
level
a
of the
random
human martial realm
explanation.
to take on the
The more
task
she
of guarding,
explained, the more she
bodyguards
hid.
of these top
Yi
disciples
Qianming
of
was
the
in a very
Tianfeng
good
Zhu
mood at
clan
this
would all
moment,
be experts
so
at
much
the
so that
8th or
Luo
9th level
Qingtong
of the
couldn't
human
answer
martial
and
realm.
ran away without
However,
catching her.
experts at the
Because
7th
he
or
already
8th
got
level
the
were
answer
enough
he
to show
wanted.
disdain for the
Luo
crowd.
Qingtong
The
ran out
group
of the
of
tent
figures
and
still
dashed
didn't
madly
wake up
through the
from her
dense
trappings.
forest. Damn, this was simply too much of a magical beast. Damn it, she was really speechless. Figure appeared at the edge of the dense forest. Otherwise, when she saw these people luring the magical beast in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group, when Bei Qing sensed that these people were heading for the same destination as her tent, this was getting interesting. Twitched. Seeing these people attack the magical beast without harming them, if the evil doctor finds luring them away, Luo touched his forehead and had a terrible headache. Their intentions. The two of them already knew the truth from Yi Qianming. Chu Lingfeng hadn't brought any bodyguards with him to this abandoned continent. It was mainly because they were prepared to die to persuade Yi Qianming not to abandon the evil doctor. They were luring the magical beast in the direction of Snowball. Yi Qianming almost made them dizzy. Mind, the word Xiaoqi was the evil doctor. Destroy the corpses and destroy the small illusion pill to disguise her identity. She narrowed her eyes and glanced in the two of them were dumbfounded in the direction where those people had left. On one hand, they admired the evil doctor's tricks. On the other hand, Luo Qingtong's figure appeared in the distance and the evil doctor had already recognized the blood-red pupils in her eyes spun violently. Quickly, they were still having the most likely route. Not only that, their master didn't raise her hand as an invisible thread shot out from her hand. How long were the two of them going to play around like this? A huge net of crisscrossing threads appeared in front of Luo Qingtong by the evil doctor. These threads were extracted by Luo Qingtong from the corpses of the 1,000 silkworms. It was originally intended to be used to forge Yi Qianxian's meridians.
Chapter 2597.
However, this was an urgent
He was
matter,
wearing
so
a
he
simple
couldn't
white
care
robe,
less, which made
Besides,
him look like
Luo
an immortal.
Qingtong still had
At
the
this
insect
moment,
treasure
his
from the
feet were
giant
lightly
kingworm.
tapped on a tree
That
branch.
was the real treasure for Yi
He stood in the
to
middle of
forge
a
his
forest
meridians.
and looked at the group
These
of figures
threads
in
were
front
only
of him
used as
indifferently.
backups.
People
It was not
from
a
the
big deal
demonic
to
moon
use some of
sect.
them.
His
Luo
face was
Qingtong's speed
indifferent
was
and his eyes were very
fast.
indifferent.
She quickly
However,
set up the
the
huge
meaning
net
of his
trap in
words
front
made
of
the
her.
hearts of the
With
people
a
in
leap,
front
she
tremble.
leaped onto the top of an ancient tree and
The
hid
group
there,
of demonic
waiting
moon
for the
sect
guards
people
to
in
lure
front
the
of him
magical
shouted
beasts
fiercely.
over.
The
And
injuries
after she
in
was
their group
done,
were
the
very
guards
serious.
quickly lured the
Almost
magical
all of
beasts
them were
over.
injured.
Rumble.
If the people from the
In
Chu
the
and the
dense
Yin
forest,
families had not
a
come
loud
to the
sound
abandoned
rang out.
continent and made it noisy,
It was
they would
the
not
sound
have been
of
able
heavy
to
hooves
escape from the
stomping on the
hands of
ground.
Zhang Beiyue
These
and the
magical
others.
beasts looked
After
like
all,
black
in this
rhinoceroses.
abandoned continent,
Their bodies
they
were
were
covered in
seriously
thick
injured and
rock-like
could not be
armor, and
compared
their
to
mouths
Zhang
were filled
Beiyue
with
and the
sharp
other
teeth.
elite disciples
They
of the
looked
three-star
extremely
Zhang
terrifying.
family. The
At
demonic
this
moon
moment,
sect
under
was
the
an
lure of
evil
the
sect
guards,
in the
they
three-star
were rushing
Great
in the
Heaven
direction
domain.
of Luo
His strength
Qingtong.
was almost the
However,
same as the
just as
Zhang
the guards
family.
were about to rush into
Logically
the
speaking,
huge
they
net
should
of
not
threads
have been
set up
forced
by
to such
Luo
an extent
Qingtong,
by Zhang
the
Beiyue
magical
and the
beasts
others.
suddenly stopped.
However, the
They
mistake was
looked
that they
warily
did
at
not
the
know
place
that
where the
Zhang
huge
Beiyue
net of
and the
threads
others had
was,
come to the
then
abandoned
turned around
continent
and
with the
ran in
great
the direction they
conspiracy.
came from.
Therefore,
They had
after
already
seeing the
discovered
actions
the
of Zhang
danger.
Beiyue and the others, they quietly followed and did
Chapter
not bring the most
2578.
elite disciples of their family.
Seeing this scene,
On the
Luo
other hand,
Qingtong
Zhang
frowned.
Beiyue was the
She
first
hadn't
young master
expected
of the
these
Zhang
magical
family.
beasts to have
He
such
was
a
the
strong
strongest
sense of
genius
danger.
of this generation
They had
of the
actually
Zhang
discovered
family.
the danger
His
so
strength
easily.
was comparable
It was
to an
also
ordinary
because she had
elder
been
with
in
real
too much of
power.
a hurry that she
Moreover,
hadn't had
the people
time
he
to
led
remove
were
the
also
scent
the
of the
most elite
thousand
disciples
silkworms
of
from
the
the
Zhang
threads.
family.
Now
In
that
this
the
way, the
magical
demonic
beasts had
moon
left,
sect people
would the
suffered a
guards
great
realize
loss
that
when
something
facing
was
Zhang
wrong?
Beiyue and the others.
She looked at the guards.
If the people from
The
the
guards
Chu and
also
Lien
stopped
families
in
had
their
not
tracks.
arrived and discovered
However,
the
they didn't
Tianluo
think that
grass,
there would be
they
any
would not
danger
have
in
been
this
able to
surroundings.
escape.
The
Later
group had
on,
set up
the
an
Chu
ambush
clan
in
and
this
Lien
dense
clan were
forest
able
and
to
had carefully
successfully
surveyed
spread
the
the news of the
surroundings.
Tianluo
They had
grass to
even
the
checked
outside
all the
world
dangers
because
of
of
their
their help.
surroundings.
If they had not
Moreover,
held back
with their
Zhang
strength,
Beiyue and
if
the
there was
others,
any
the
danger in
people
the
from the
vicinity,
Chu and Lien
how could
families
they
would
not
have
have
died long
detected it?
ago.
However,
Therefore,
the
even
strange
so, they could
movements
not
of the
leave the
magical
abandoned
beasts were seen
continent
as
at
part
this
of their
moment.
plan.
Not
When
to
the
mention,
magical
they
beasts
already
saw
knew
that
that
they
the
were
purpose of
deliberately
Zhang
luring
Beiyue
them,
and the
they
others was in
became
the heart of
vigilant
the
and
continent.
refused to move
It
forward.
was very likely that
Seeing
they had
that the
discovered
magical
a
beasts
peerless
were
treasure.
about to run further
Under
and
such
further away,
circumstances,
completely
how could the
ignoring
demonic
their bait,
moon sect
the
members
guards
became
became
anxious?
anxious.
They
But
had
now
gone to
that they were
great lengths to
seriously
try
injured,
Chu
there was nothing
in
they
this
could
dense
do.
forest.
At this
It was
moment,
very
Yu
likely
Mingqian
that this
appeared.
was their only
Everyone
chance.
looked at Yu
If they
Mingqian
missed this
warily.
chance, they
They
wouldn't
didn't
be
know
able to
how
make
Yu
a move
Mingqian had
against
seen
Chu
through their
Lingfeng.
identities and
After
found them.
escaping the
Yu
encirclement,
Mingqian didn't
he would
care about their
definitely leave
gazes
this
at all.
abandoned continent.
At that time, when he returned to the Tianfeng Chu clan
He
and
stood on
told
the
them
tree
about the
branch and
ambush,
looked at the
they
people
would
of
all
the
be
demonic
finished,
moon sect
including
coldly.
Chu Yuqing. He said,
How could this be?
You don't have to
The
be
hearts of
afraid
the
of what
guards
I will
sank.
do to you.
Try using
I'm not
this.
interested in
Miss
trash like
Kerr
you.
and the others brought
Someone
it.
from the 3-star region.
It said that it was this
Yu
that caused them
Mingqian,
to be
the young
hunted
master
down
of
by
the
the
Inscription
magical
Cities
beasts of the
Federation of
abandoned
Trade
continent.
Unions. It
As the
wasn't even
guard
worth
spoke,
mentioning.
he took out a
The
handful
reason
of
he was
emerald
able to
green
discover the
spiritual
demonic
grass.
moon sect's
Luo
traces was
Qingtong
naturally
looked at the
because he
extra
had sensed their
spiritual herbs in
tyrannical
his
aura,
hand and blinked
which
her
was
eyes.
different from that of the
Damn.
Chu and Lien
Couldn't be,
families.
right?
With the
Wasn't
help
this
of the
the
spiritual
spiritual
grass
grass that
seeking
she had
array,
tricked Chu
he
Kerr and
easily
the
found
others
their
into
whereabouts.
taking away the
Yu
beast
Mingqian
baiting
wasn't
grass?
interested in why
It had
people from
actually
the
appeared
3-star
in the hands
domain
of
would
these
appear
guards.
on the abandoned
Could it be
continent
that
of
the
the
people these
6-star
guards
domain
were
loyal to had some relationship with Chu Kerr and the others? But Chu Kerr and the others were really lucky. They had been
Chapter
chased by the magical
2598.
beast with the beast
Luo
baiting grass
Qingtong
and
was
hadn't
getting
died.
closer and closer
Not
to
only
Yi
that,
Qianxian.
he even met the
She
person
might not
who was
have
going
noticed
against
it,
Chu
but
Lingfeng.
Yu Mingqian could tell
However,
that she
it
was
was
treating Yi
fortunate that they
Qianxian
met
and
the
the
people
others
who were
differently.
dealing with Chu Lingfeng.
The other party and those
Otherwise,
white jade
how would these
masked men
people
knew
be
each
able to
other.
lure those
those magical beasts back. But Luo Qingtong had also recognized the white masked man. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. Was very afraid of she had just wanted to jump out and use herself as a bait to lure those people into the net when they were in the Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. However, with his sudden appearance and the abnormal behavior of those magical beasts, the white masked there was a high probability that these people would discover that he had done circumstances. At that time, they would not be Luo Qingtong. Even if she used all her opportunity, she might not be able to kill all of them. He could only rely on these evil moon sect members. But now, with the beast luring grasp, I can treat your injuries, and I can also help you improve your strength. To watch them step into the trap. As long as you promise me one thing. After Luo Qingtong looked at the evil luring grasp members, she decisively hid herself again. After all, he was the only one on the abandoned continent the magical beasts in batches. Looking at their current situation, there were obviously other enemies on the abandoned continent. Those magical beasts had no other choice but to promise him. Rumble. Yu Mingxian's words made the evil moon sect members even more surprised. 2579. Why should we believe this time? The magical beasts that were tempted by the beast luring grass to the point that they lost their minds and only knew greedily at Yu Mingxian's fairy-like face. Did not discover the danger in front of them. He laughed ferociously and said, together with the guards, they rushed madly towards the huge net trap. Then we'll capture you and force the method out of you. The guards held the beast luring grass high and were only prepared to pass through the forest below Luo Qingtong. Look at your delicate
when they
skin.
rushed to the middle of the
I'm
forest,
afraid you can't
in an
withstand
instant
a few
streams
rounds
of
of
blood
torture.
splashed out.
If you know
The
what's
silk
good for
threads
you,
of the
hand over the method
silkworms
immediately.
turned into the coldest
We
and
might
most
be able to
terrifying
give you some
killing
comfortable
weapons,
punishment.
cutting their limbs and
As
bones.
he spoke,
along
he
with their
laughed
heads and
arrogantly
necks
with a
into
smug
pieces.
look on his face.
Countless pieces
These
of
evil
corpses
moon
rose
sect
from the
members were
crisscrossing
originally
huge
from an
net.
evil sect.
Luo Qingtong's
They did not
net
have any
trap was
taboos
much
or
tighter
bottom
than those
lines.
made by the
Yu
thousand
Ming Qian
silkworms
had come
before.
alone. Although they were a little afraid,
these
after
net traps
carefully
had no
inspecting
blind
the
surroundings and
finding that
there was no ambush and only Yu Ming Qian
calculated by someone
relaxed,
appearing at the
not
places
to
that
mention,
the guards
although
had
Yu
to
Ming
pass
Qian's
through,
temperament
cutting
was
their bodies
extraordinary,
from top to
it
bottom.
didn't have any
In an
deterrence or
instant,
threat.
blood flowed
Seeing
like a
that there
river,
was no trace
fog
of
rose into the
cultivation
air,
on his body,
and the surrounding
group
forest
of
was
demonic
dyed
moon
into a
sect
bloody
members
color.
felt disdain in
These
their hearts.
experts at the 7th
They
or
were
8th
indeed
level of the
seriously
human
injured,
martial realm,
but not just
even
anyone
in death,
could order them
did not
around.
expect that they would
Since
be killed
this
by a
immortal
trap
like
set
man
by
wanted
someone
to make
else
use
when they
of
set
them,
up a trap
then
to
don't
kill
blame them
Chu Ling
for
Feng.
being ruthless.
Their corpses
Wouldn't
were
it be better
dismembered
to
in
capture
midair.
him and slowly
Some of the
force him to
stronger ones
confess
did
his
not
methods
die
than
after
to
being
agree
cut
to
up
his
for a
request,
while,
and could
Why
only
do I have
stare
to
at
do as
everything
he
in the
says?
forest. The other
They
party
saw
was
that under
really
the
like a
soaking
celestial
and
being
splashing of
who
their
was
blood,
above the mortal
the
world.
huge net lines
He was really
entwined
too
in the
naive.
forest were revealed.
The man from the
like a
demonic
huge
moon
mouth
sect
of a
was
magical
pleased with
beast that
himself.
chose people to devour, completely swallowing their bodies.
The others also
and in this
remained
bloody
silent,
scene,
a young man wearing a light
person's
blue robe
actions.
fell from the top
Their
of a tree.
figures spread out and
Deske,
surrounded
if it's
Yu
not
Ming
red
Long.
clothes, then it's
Seeing
easy
this
to get
scene,
dirty.
Yu Mingqian's eyes,
They heard the young
which
man
were as
say
light
with
as
disdain.
colored glass,
The appearance
suddenly
on her
blossomed.
face was covered
The
by more than
coldness in
half
them
of
was
a
extremely
birthmark,
strong,
looking both
interesting.
ferocious and
You
terrifying.
people really don't know
Landing
what's
in
good
this
for you.
bloody scene, she was like a demon god that destroyed the world. However, the smile on her lips was extremely evil and bewitching. It gave people a feeling that there was nothing wrong with it. His
Whether
aura
it was the
completely changed the
ugliness or
moment
the
he made his
malevolence on
move.
her face,
An extremely
turned
cold
into a
and
perfect
murderous power
contrast to her
suddenly
peerless
bloomed from his
charm.
body.
People could
At the
only
same
see
time,
her
an
unparalleled
inscription
elegance
pattern
and
in his
neglect
hand
everything
rushed toward
else.
the demonic moon
This was an
sect member in
extremely
front of him.
beautiful and
The
enchanting
inscription
young man.
pattern also
He had a
appeared.
demonic charm
In an
that
instant,
seeped into
the
his
sound
bones.
of countless weapons
With a single
whistling
glance,
could be heard from it.
one would be
In
captivated
an
and
instant, the
bewitched.
demonic moon sect member seemed to be
Luo
in a
Qingtong
blood-red
raised her
azure
hand
field.
and brushed away the
His
blood
surroundings
mist.
were filled with
When the
weapons
guards
and
were cut
traps.
to death,
The
battle
strong
formation
aura of
initial
death and the
appearance,
smell of blood
turning
covered the
void
aura
into
of the
reality,
beast-luring
place
grass,
of death,
causing them to regain
battle
their
inscription
rationality
mark.
in an instant.
Are you a battle soul master?
At that moment,
or are
as
you
they
a
looked
battle
at the
soul
giant
master who can
blood-colored
turn
net
the
before
surrounding
them,
murderous
their four
aura into
hosts began
weapons?
to incessantly dig
Everyone's
into the
faces
ground
were
as they
filled with
desperately
shock.
tried to stop
There
their
were strong and
footsteps.
weak battle soul
However,
masters.
their momentum was too
In addition
strong
to the
and they
battle
couldn't stop
inscription
for a
pattern
while.
and their own
However,
cultivation
Luo
strength,
Qingtong had
there
no
was another
intention
way.
of letting them all
It was
die
based
here.
on the depth
She
and
still had
research
great
of the
use for
battle
these
inscription
magical beasts.
pattern.
Therefore,
When an
after
ordinary
she
battle
brushed away
soul
the blood
master
mist,
controlled the
she
battle
raised her hand
inscription
and
pattern,
blinked. He
in
could
the
at
blink
most
of an
manifest
eye,
the
the
murderous
giant
aura
crimson
in the
net that
battle
was
inscription
constructed by
pattern.
her was torn
They
apart
could either
and
turn into
scattered
the
in all
shadows of
directions.
swords or shrieking
Bang.
beasts. There were many different kinds of murderous aura. However, there was
In
a
the
type
end,
of battle
it
soul
attracted
master
wave
who,
after
after
wave of
deep
magical
research,
beasts.
could turn the
If
battle
I hadn't
inscription
run into
pattern in his
Chu Yuqing on
hand
the
into a
way,
death
I would have
trap,
been saved.
trapping and
They
killing
still
the
didn't
enemy
know
he
what
wanted
would
to
happen
deal
to
with
them.
them. Perhaps
Perhaps
they had already
that
been
an ordinary
swallowed by
battle
those
soul
magical
master could
beasts and
achieve.
turned into
That would
underground
require an
fertilizer.
even more profound
However, although
inscription
Chu
ability.
Yuqing and the others had
Not
saved
only
them,
that, but
they were
strength
still in
and
dire
cultivation
straits.
were also
Chu
indispensable.
and the others were
For
in an
such a
extremely
battle soul
sorry
master,
state from
unless
being
his
chased
enemy
by the
strength
magical
was far
beasts.
above his,
Not
he
only
could
were they
break through
covered in
10,000
wounds,
spells
but
with
their
brute
clothes
force.
were also torn to
Otherwise,
pieces by the
once
sharp
trapped by
teeth
the
and
death
claws
trap
of those
formed by
magical
his battle
beasts as they
inscription
fled.
pattern,
When
it
Chu
would be a
Yuqing and the
situation
others
of
encountered
instant
them,
death.
it was like being trapped in the domain of a sky martial
realm
realm expert. Life and death were in his hands.
Chapter 25.
Just as everyone was thinking this,
her and Chu
they heard
Yufei's
the
pure
demonic
and clean
moon
bodies
bodies
were all trapped by the death trap
uncouth
formed by
guards.
Yu Ming's battle
When this
inscription
operation was
pattern
over,
screamed shrilly.
they would become the
Then
laughingstock
everyone
of
saw
many
that
people.
he was imprisoned in
And all
midair.
of this was because
Then
of Chu
countless
Xiaofeng and
weapons
Luo
pierced his
Shaoqi,
heart in an instant.
especially that Luo
Not only
Shaoqi.
that, his body
Thinking
seemed
of how
to be
she didn't
suspended by
hesitate
an
to let them
invisible
take away
force.
those spiritual
While hanging
herbs,
there,
Chu
countless those weapons
didn't
flew
believe
past.
that she didn't know
While
the effects
piercing
of
his
those
heart,
spiritual
they did not
herbs.
forget to slice
She
off
must
his
have
flesh
known.
piece by piece.
She knew that those were
His beast-curdling screams were shrill.
Otherwise, she
but in
wouldn't
an
have
instant
stubbornly
he turned
given
into a
those
pile of
spiritual
white
herbs to them.
bones.
Under
At
the
that time,
horrified
she thought that
gazes
she
of
was
the
afraid
crowd,
of them and
the
wanted to
demonic
spend money to
moonsect
avoid
member who had
disaster.
turned into a
In
pile
the
of
end,
bones
what did
was
she
still
mean by
alive.
spending money to
What a
avoid
hair-raising
disaster?
way to die.
The other party
Everyone's
was
eyes
clearly
were
waiting
filled
for
with
them to
extreme
fall
fear.
into his trap.
You are a
Seeing
battle
them
soul
get
master,
the beast-luring grass
Who
in
are
their
you?
hands, they didn't even realize it.
They looked at the man in front of them who looked like he was floating in the air
face was
and had
ugly
no
and her
lethality
limbs
at
were
all.
trembling.
Yu Ming
She
Qian
wished
had
she could
completely
chop Luo
retracted
Xiaoqi
her
into
power.
pieces.
She had
And Chu
returned to her
Xiaofeng, who
previous
indulged
powerless
Luo
state.
Xiaoqi.
However,
If
the
it weren't
crowd
for
had
him,
just witnessed
Luo
him killing the
Xiaoqi wouldn't
demonic
have given those
moonsect member.
spiritual herbs to
How
them.
could they still
In
dare to
short,
treat
all
him
of
as a
this was their
weakling?
fault.
At that
When
moment,
Chuker's
his
voice
heart was
sounded
trembling
with
with
fear.
Chu Yufei's
Their
face
strength
also
had not
revealed a
recovered
gloomy
yet.
smile. All of them were
Compared to
seriously
before,
injured.
Chu Yufei was
They were
very
no
different.
match for Yu Ming Qian.
The most obvious thing
Moreover,
was that the
even if they
gentle
had
and
recovered
kind
their
smile
strength,
on her
the
face
death
was
trap
gone.
formed by the
At this
battle
moment,
inscription
Chu
pattern
Yufei's
Yu Ming
face was
Qian had
cold
just
and her
revealed
eyes
was
were
not
cold.
enough. Her eyes were full of resentment and ice.
She and Chuker had encountered those things together and had completely destroyed the defense in her heart. Chapter 2600. Thinking that she was the one who was going on. How could there be such a terrifying figure in this 6-star region's abandoned continent? She was good at playing with people's hearts and sweep across this abandoned continent. She thought that they had taken advantage of her by forcing Luo Shaoqi. Everyone was trembling in fear as they looked at Yu Mingqian. At the same time, she felt that she had vented her anger. Could it be that you're also here because of the news that the Zhan family all her wishful thinking? If that's the case, we're willing to be your lackeys. Had deliberately given those their words made Yu Mingqian raise his eyebrows. She wanted them to be chased by those magical Zhan family. She hated that she thought that her scheme had people from the demonic moon. In the end, she was played in circles. However, after hearing what they were saying had died, it seemed like their purpose in coming to this abandoned continent wasn't simple. At that time, let's see how Chu Xiaofeng, a member of the demonic moon sect, said with trepidation. As for Chu Tianming and the others, they looked in the direction of the dense forest and the ancient godly item is in this abandoned continent. It's very likely that it has something to do with the changes in the heart of the continent and the birth of the sky grass. If they had a good relationship with Chuker and the others abandoned continent and sealed off all information, wouldn't they be able to obtain great benefits? We discovered their movements. Everyone was trying their best to flatter Chuker. We were accidentally discovered by them. At the same time, they were also very attentive to the Zhan family are currently chasing after us. Because without Chu Lingfeng, Chu Yufei was once again the little princess of godly item Chu family willing to listen to you by the head of the family. The member of the demonic moon sect smiled at her like his own daughter. It was only when Chu Lingfeng's true descendant of the family had yet he had appeared that Chu Yufei's identity became in this abandoned environment alone. Once Chu Lingfeng died, everything would return to its original trajectory. In that case, they would naturally listen to his orders. Or Chu Yufei after all, they were no match for him. They all thought the same. They also mistook Yu Mingqian's request for them to listen to his orders. Chapter 25. The ancient godly item in the heart of the continent. Chu Yuqing and the others were attacking Chu Lingfeng with all their might. Eyes narrowed because they didn't want others to find out that they were the ones who had attacked Chu Lingfeng. Filled with they didn't dare to kill Chu Lingfeng. He hadn't expected that he would receive such news when he had just randomly found some people to attack Luo Qingtong since they had already surrounded him. He didn't know if these people's information was true or so long. If it was really an ancient divine object, it would not be a bad idea to obtain it. Seeing that his injuries were becoming more and more difficult to heal, the slightest bit of information about God was a 1 in a million treasure. Just then, they heard the sound of a stampeding horde of magical beasts. Such a treasure would appear on a small abandoned continent in a small 6-star region. Let those magical beasts coupled with the meaning in his eyes made the demonic moon sect members realize that they had guessed wrongly. This man with astonishing strength actually didn't come for the ancient divine object, and his healing abilities were no longer as strong as before. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have opened his mouth. Once those magical beasts swarmed him, they would definitely trample him to death. At that time, what undying body, after they had gained the support of the other party would gain strength, the true winner would be the ancient divine object. It would be their third eldest in their hearts. With a wave of his hand, Chu Yuqing's guards immediately scattered, glanced at them and said, "We'll talk about the ancient divine object later." The group stood at both ends, what I want you to do is something else. For the magical beast to charge in and trample Luo Qingtong to death. It's this young man named Luo Shaoqi. The magical beast's stomps were extremely loud. Leave it to me. Very quickly, a line of magical beasts appeared in front of Chu Yuqing and the others. Why isn't there anyone in front of these magical beasts? He didn't know if the ancient divine objects mentioned by these people were true or charging in their direction. But the news about Luo Shaoqi's divine magical beasts was running over on their own. Naturally, he knew what was more important. Were they behind them? As soon as Yu Mingqian's words came out, the people of the evil moon sect looked at each other in dismay. However, that place was filled with smoke and dust caused by the magical beast's why he didn't do it himself. None of them could clearly see the young man behind them. However, they didn't care to ask any more questions when they were just waiting for those magic beasts to rush over and crush Chu Lingfeng. Ruthless and terrifying. However, no one noticed that when the magical beasts arrived, this master was probably constantly wailing and struggling to get up to help Chu Lingfeng. Only as the crowd thought by the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others, daring to say suddenly looked in the direction of the magical glanced at them coldly. He took out some elixirs and handed them to the people of the evil moon sect. To Chu Yuqing and the others originally wanted to say that the spirit chi in the abandoned continent had a corrosive effect, so the elixirs had no effect. However, when they saw the elixirs that Yu Mingqian took out, Snowball was unable to restrain the excitement and anticipation that Yu Mingqian took out were actually effective. Although they were very weak, they were effective in the end. This was more important than anything else. Became even more resounding as long as they were effective. In the eyes of Chu Yuqing and the others, they thought it was heartbroken and despairing. As the crowd thought this, they immediately took the elixirs and swallowed them. That idiot Chu Lingfeng treasures it so much, saying anything. Now that you see Chu Lingfeng naturally had no effect by these magical beasts, the elixirs that Yu Mingqian had were the top elixirs of the inscription association. The more despair you feel, the better. Not only that, but they were also supported by his medicinal inscription technique. The retention effect was comparable to the super-perfect elixirs refined by Luo Qingtong. Under such circumstances,
Chapter
the elixirs
25
that he took out were naturally effective. In the end, this beast wasn't easy to deal with, not as effective as the elixirs refined by Luo between life and death. However, they still had a healing effect on the injuries of the people of the evil moon sect. His master couldn't deal with it, and his pet couldn't also asked the people of the evil moon sect to take off their man and beast to the bone. All of their bodies were engraved with inscription arrays that could increase their strength and concentrate all their potential into one point. Because of Chu Lingfeng. After doing all this, Yu Mingqian floated away. The magical beast had already charged in front of them behind, and the guards had looked at his back in shock and waiting to see a good show. The other party was simply too terrifying. Before they could react, a voice rang out. She was a perfect example of what it meant to have the appearance of an invisible thread shot out from the back of the horde. No one dared to stay here any longer. After Yu Mingqian left, they quickly left as well. To being chased away by Luo Qingtong's, he did not forget to kill the demonic moon sect member who was still lying on the ground. They had originally been charging towards Chu Lingfeng, who was in the middle of the encirclement. That's right, the evil moon sect member who had attacked Yu Mingqian was still alive even after being reduced to a pile of bones. And the others had been waiting to see Chu Lingfeng get trampled to death. While Yu Mingqian was expected that the magical beast would suddenly change directions. Was also living in an abyss of suffering. This time they had become the magical beast's targets. There was no other reason. After she explained to Yi Qianming what hubby meant, on Chu Yuqing's face took a fancy to this title and asked her to stop calling him brother upward and call his face was filled with disbelief. What kind of husband was this? Seeing those magical beasts rushing towards him, hubby, he hurriedly shouted in exasperation to the eyes. However, she couldn't refute Yi Qianming's encirclement. Didn't you say that Yuqing's heart was in a state of panic? Or are you just trying to trick me? The magical beast's attacks were secondary. Voice was cold. More importantly, he was afraid that the magical beasts would break through the encirclement. That way, Chu Lingfeng would be able to escape with his life. Chapter 26. What's going on? If she admitted it, wouldn't this man think that she was scolding him last night? Before Chu Yuqing and the others could figure out what was going on, and deliberately took off his clothes. Shot out from behind the magical beast toward like a bolt of lightning. Succumb to her own deception. In an instant, it had entered the encirclement and appeared beside Even if she was beaten to death, Luo Qingtong's body was covered with the blood of the guard she had killed. At most, Yi Qianming was also dyed red. Anyway, he wouldn't do anything to her because her body was similar to Luo Qingtong. She looked at him and snorted. Luo Qingtong's heart was madly biting her handkerchief. Chu Lingfeng, but on the surface she called of her appearance weakly, was stunned. Her voice was cried out in surprise, without an ounce of strength. But in Yi Qianming's ears, it was unusually pleasing to the blood-robed young man in front of him. The meaning of this title was indeed very different. Excitement for some reason, to express his feelings at this moment, he fiercely wiped his blood off his face. Softened. He was both emotional and wanted to cry. He only felt that the girl's voice was very pleasant to the ear. I miss you so much. In fact, in order to be able to match the identity of Luo Xiaoqi, by Luo Qingtong deliberately lowered her voice and changed it into a slightly hoarse voice of a teenager. Luo Qingtong was completely different from soft and pleasant to the ears. Her heart was filled with helplessness. But Yi Qianming felt that it was indescribably pleasant to the ears. Well, what's he getting so worked up for? Yi Qianming felt comfortable to leave first, but he didn't show it on his face. Speechless. However, she was already used to Chu Lingfeng's one-track mind and narrowed personality. Aren't you praising me? She knew that it was useless. I can't hear it clearly in my dream, so she didn't waste any more time. I think you can call me a few more times during the day. Hearing this, Chu Lingfeng's expression became sour. She even suspected that Yi Qianming was deliberately messing with her. He wiped the tears from his face and stood beside her. That her previous explanation was completely fooling him. His domineering expression turned into a pitiful toothache. But she couldn't expose Yi Qianming. After all, she was the one who fooled Yi Qianming first. Chu Lingfeng's body was covered in wounds, wouldn't she be giving his bloodline power that could be used against her? And slower. At that time, the other party would have a chance to deal with spiritual energy in his body. Luo Qingtong thought so. After entering the abandoned continent, the righteousness for the sake of the greater good. A lot of spiritual anyway, Yi Qianming and the others didn't know what the word husband meant. But now, under the siege of Chu Yuqing and the others, anyway, in the end, the spiritual herbs he would obtain had all been used up. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong called him husband. Don't worry, I have some. In the end, the more she called him husband, she raised her hand and took out the spiritual herbs in her storage ring. Then threw them to Chu Lingfeng. Heard her calling him husband. She had been running all the way here with those eyes behind the mask, couldn't help but soften. And it wasn't like she hadn't done anything. This woman, if only she was so obedient when she was by her along the way. Usually she was used to putting on an act, but when it came to tricking people, she became obedient in all kinds of ways. This is for you. Yi Qianming, you and Snowball can eat it together. Luo Qingtong threw 2 bottles of pills to Chu Lingfeng. Was resting, she wanted him to feed them to himself and Snowball. Thank you for the compliment. The pills that Luo Qingtong refined all had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. Then he narrowed his eyes and said to Luo Qingtong, word by word, weren't as good as 20% of what they were outside. Luo Qingtong was still better than taking a breath. What's more, Luo Qingtong didn't have much on her own saliva, but she had a lot of pills. Cough, cough, cough. These pills had all been refined by her in Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. Did this damned man even know what the word nothing to do at that time? She gotten a lot of benefits from appraising the items of those mercenary groups. Brother, you can't call her the pills that Luo Qingtong gave him. Without saying anything, he directly poured out a bottle and ate it. The rest was all given to Snowball. He didn't ask Luo Qingtong why her pills still had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. Yi Qianming
From Chu
looked indifferent.
Lingfeng's point of view,
Since
his
husband
master
is a
could do
compliment,
anything
wife
that would
should
shock
be the
people,
same, right? It wouldn't be too
Of
much.
course,
I don't know how
this
to
was his
explain
master.
the word wife.
Heretical
But
Dr.
obviously
Ghost Eye.
Luo Xiaoqi,
Master, I'm
right?
done.
Yi
Chu
Qianming
Lingfeng
was in
snorted
high
and looked at
spirits.
Luo Qingtong.
As soon as Luo
For some
Qingtong's
reason,
medicine
Luo
entered his
Qingtong
mouth,
inexplicably
all the
heard
wounds
joy
on
from
his
his
body were
words.
healed. Did this man
However,
think
the
that
bloodline
wife
power in
was
his
a curse
body
had
word.
been exhausted?
Did he want to
and he
get
could
back
no
at her
longer
for what
convert the
happened
attacks
last
of
night?
others into energy
Silly
like
man,
before.
you've sold yourself.
While healing himself, he
Luo
could still
Qingtong
fight
looked at
bravely.
Yi Qianming's
Right
twitching
now,
lips
he
and
had the
didn't know what
strength
to
of an
say.
ordinary cultivator.
Forget it, let him be happy.
Chu Lingfeng was worried
Alas,
that
it
he
was all
couldn't
because
protect
she cheated
Luo
him.
Qingtong.
Otherwise,
After
there
all,
wouldn't be such a thing
master
at all.
strength hasn't
Luo
even reached the
Qingtong
venerable
thought so
realm.
and felt
He
powerless
was really
in an
too
instant.
useless.
She
She
scratched
actually
the wall
needed
in
her
her heart
master
and
to
then
save
said
her
with
at this
twitching
time.
lips,
Chu
"Brother,
Lingfeng
as long
was
as you are
vexed.
happy."
He opened
What
his
else was
mouth,
there to say
wanting
about
to tell
her man?
Luo Qingtong
Of
to
course,
leave
she
first,
had to pamper
but
him
he saw
even if she
Luo
had to kneel
Qingtong's
down.
figure rise.
Who asked her to
Let's
cheat
go.
him first? She
But
jumped
even
off
if
this
this man
Snowball's
wanted to
body
get
and
back
pulled
at her,
Chu Lingfeng
he
up.
had to understand the
Snowball's
matter clearly
internal
first.
injuries had healed.
Wasn't this sending
Its
herself to
broken
him
right
to be
leg had
molested?
also recovered to its
Fortunately,
original
he called
state.
her wife.
If he called someone else,
The moment Luo
that scene was
Qingtong
too
and Chu
beautiful.
Lingfeng
She
came
didn't
up,
dare to look
it
at
immediately soared
Luo
into the air.
Qingtong's lips
Chu
twitched and her
Lingfeng,
heart was
Chu
extremely
Yuqing
tangled.
and the others were
How could
currently
she tell
dealing
Yi
with the
Qianming
rampaging
that the word
magical beast.
wife wasn't
He'd
a
been
curse
paying
word?
attention to Chu
It wasn't
Lingfeng
the
the
word
entire time.
husband either.
When he saw Luo
Damn it.
Qingtong appear
Just when
by
she
Chu
was feeling
Lingfeng's side,
depressed,
his
Yi
expression
Qianming's heart was
immediately
particularly
froze.
comfortable.
When he saw Luo
These two words
Qingtong
were
and Chu
indeed very
Lingfeng
different.
both get onto
How long
Snowball's
had it
body,
been since
he
he saw
stunned.
Luo Qingtong
Snowball,
change her
who had
expression
been
so
seriously
much?
injured and
This
unable
woman
to
deserved
move,
to be taught a
suddenly
lesson.
soared into the
Yi
air.
Qianming's heart was
Chu
happy.
Yuqing's expression
Looking
was
at the obvious
indescribably
depression on
furious.
Luo Qingtong's
Hurry,
face,
hurry and bring
immediately
them down
turned
for
and
me.
left. He
By the
absolutely
way,
couldn't let Chu
his words
Lingfeng
swept
escape.
over Luo
Chu
Qingtong
Lingfeng's
from
voice
behind.
was hoarse. The clothes that you said you would mend for me, mend as soon as possible.
Chapter 2585.
After hearing Yi Qianming's
Who's
words,
that youth that
Luo
suddenly
Qingtong
appeared?
was even more
Why did
certain
he
that
suddenly
was
come
trying
to
to
save
get back
Chu
at her for
Lingfeng?
what happened last
And how
night.
did the injuries on Chu
Supplement
Lingfeng
my
and
ass.
that demonic
Luo
beast heal so
Qingtong had a
quickly?
toothache when she
Chu
thought of that
Yuqing's
stupid
expression
dress.
was malevolent.
Previously,
As
she
he
had
thought
taken
about
it
these
out with
questions,
great
the
ambition
expression
and
on his
said that
face
after
kept
it was
changing.
repaired, she
His
would be
facial
able to gain
expression
Yi
was
Qianming's
twitching
favor.
violently for an
In the
indescribable
end,
reason.
Luo Qingtong's
The
lips
guards had
twitched
been
in
in
the
the
middle
thought
of
of the
driving
sleeve that
away
had
and
been
stopping
pricked
by
by
her
her
like
like
a
a
hornet.
hornet.
When
Was
they
it too
heard his
late to
voice,
pretend
they
that he
raised their
didn't hear
heads and saw
anything?
Chu Lingfeng
However,
and
it
Luo
was clear that
Qingtong
Yi
soaring
Qianming
into
knew
the
her
air.
very well.
They were instantly
Give it to me
shocked.
this evening.
Quick, stop
Otherwise,
them.
Yi
The guards
Qianming
were so
didn't finish
anxious
his
that they
words,
didn't
but
have
Luo
time to deal
Qingtong
with the
already
demonic
knew the
beasts.
consequences.
They leapt into
In
the
short,
air and
this man
charged
would
towards
not let her
Luo
off so
Qingtong and
easily.
Chu Lingfeng. God knows if he
Master,
would grab her and force
seeing
her
the
to mend
guards,
his clothes
all
on
of
the
whom were
spot.
at the 6th level
At
of
that
the
time,
human
she
martial
could forget
realm,
about getting
rushing
any
over,
better. Chu Lingfeng
one by
felt
one he would
extremely
make up
vexed.
for it until he
If
died.
he'd known that he'd run into his master here, he would have brought the guards the Tianfeng Chu clan had prepared for him. That man had said
He
before
definitely
that if she
wouldn't have
didn't
lent
let
it
Chu
well,
Yuqing and
he
the
still
others
had
have
a
the
lot of
chance to harm
clothes.
his master. Luo
Chu
Qingtong
Yuqing, you
originally
bastard.
thought that she could move
If
out
you
of
dare
Yi
to harm
Qianming's
my
tent
master,
tonight
I'll
and live
kill you.
somewhere else. Sitting on the
After
little
all, there
snowball,
were no more
Chu
mosquitoes.
Lingfeng's eyes were
She
bloodshot
even
as
took
he
off
watched
his
the guards
clothes.
charge at him.
No matter how she
He
looked at
clenched
it,
his fists
it was
tightly as
impossible
he
for her
shouted
to
at
live
Chu
in his
Yuqing
tent
and the others
anymore.
below him. But in the end, this
Stop.
happened again.
Master,
Luo Qingtong's
Yuqing
heart
and
was
the
filled
others
with
were
tears.
shocked.
They'd
She
never heard of
gloomily
a
took
fool
out the
like
clothes
Chu
from her
Lingfeng having a
storage room
master,
and stared blankly
Chu
at the
Yuqing
holes that
carefully
she had
examined
made.
Luo Qingtong
Damn it, the
and
more you
discovered
mend,
that
the
she was
worse it
only
gets.
at the venerable
How
realm.
was she going to tell Yi
He
Qianming?
immediately laughed coldly.
Ah,
A bastard child outside is a bastard child. Chu Lingfeng. You fool,
Chapter
you're actually willing to
2604.
degrade yourself
Not
and
far
recognize
away,
a kid who isn't
Beijing
even at the
informed you
venerable
who had heard
realm
the
as your
conversation
master.
between Luo
How can someone
Qingtong
like
and
you
Yi
be
Qianxian
worthy of being our
looked
Chu
very
clan's
excited.
young master?
Mending clothes?
Today, I'll
The
clean
evil
up the
doctor?
house on behalf
Before
of the
they knew
Tianfeng
that
Chu
Luo
clan.
Qingtong was Luo
When Chu
Xiaoqi,
Yuqing saw how
they didn't think it
protective
was a
Chu
big deal was of Luo Qingtong. He felt but now that they knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, he hadn't expected to reap such a harvest this time. With the evil doctor's character, they had no doubt that he would degrade himself to become someone else's servant. But since that's the case, don't blame me for using this weakness to kill him. And then they secretly looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong. In any case, since she appeared here, she was already a dead person. Visible. The two of them looked as if they had been struck by lightning, but also felt that it was just as they had expected. Chu Lingfeng here because there was no one to take the blame for them. If Beijing and Luo Qingtong's appearance gave them a reason, after killing them here, he would make it look like Chu Lingfeng was killed by the young man. What did this matter have to do with them? The two of them covered their faces, would find out and their expressions were even more hopeless than Luo Qingtong's. Everything would be settled. The evil doctor's mending skills were so terrible that they couldn't bear to look at it. Had personally delivered to their master later. How could he not? Their master would have another chance to bully the evil doctor. Back and laughed heartily. Master, you have to take it easy. Order. His killing accidentally go overboard. The guards were also thinking the same thing as Chu have a conflict. Immediately, those who attacked did not hold back. The two of them were indescribably hopeless. But Luo Qingtong didn't feel it at all. Rushing towards them from all directions. She was looking at the clothes in her hand with a martial realm, looking at the sleeves that had almost been poked to death level of the human martial realm. She really felt a twinge of pain in her heart. They're all experts. Why was this needlework so difficult? Clan really spared no effort in protecting their top silkworms to deal with the enemies. She was simply invincible. Those strong guards in the human martial arts realm couldn't even think about getting close to stop Chu Lingfeng. But when it came to this place, it was also needlework. This guy was only at the mending of clothes was so difficult. Although the strength he could display was comparable to that of the human martial realm, clearly seen how the bloodline strength had been exhausted. But when she started to move her hands, her hands and the threads didn't listen to her. She didn't go through untold hardships to save him just to see him throw his life away. Luo Qingtong had no choice but to tear and poke again and again. Luo Qingtong scolded Chu Lingfeng in a low voice. If Luo Qingtong didn't have her blood-red eyes and dodge in time, she was surrounded by fingers might have been poked into pieces together with the sleeves. These silk threads circled around Luo Qingtong, suddenly enveloping her in her hand gloomily. And Snowball. All of a sudden, her eyes lit up. Looking at the guards who were rushing over, Luo Qingtong smiled as she looked at the clothes in her hands. She patted Snowball's back. Then she hugged it and telling it not to stop and to continue rushing at her leaving figure. After receiving her order, felt a headache. Snowball didn't hesitate in the slightest. Its four limbs stomped fiercely in the air, and in an instant, doctor it was like a snow-white stream of light. Every time they rushed towards the guards who were rushing over, fight, they felt so tired. Overestimating having yourself. 2 masters who were so naughty, dare to rush towards us. Bitter. These guards thought highly of themselves. Expressions were very interesting. Strength they couldn't help but pray that the two of them wouldn't go overboard. This was obvious in their eyes. Their hearts were too weak and couldn't withstand too much stimulation. Had been exhausted. While Bei Qing and no matter how the crowd calculated, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng couldn't rush out of the encirclement they were in. Since the other party was rushing over to be killed, then they would fulfill her wish. Chapter 26. The crowd rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng to do this, right? Because they were proud and proud. Heart was they didn't use any martial skills to attack. He was already looking forward to Luo Qingtong's expression. Otherwise, they would have discovered that Luo Qingtong was surrounded by circles of silk. Would she come to him pitifully and beg him from all directions? At this moment, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were like huge meat grinders as they rushed forward. This feeling was not bad at all. As for those guards, they still didn't know anything. Especially when he looked at Luo Qingtong. Get down here. He felt depressed, at this moment, but he couldn't do anything. Rushed towards Luo Qingtong, and Chu Lingfeng filled with joy. He raised his hand and tried to grab Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng off Snowball. At this moment, Luo Qingtong just excitedly hugged the clothes in her hands and walked in from outside. A tragic cry rang out. Brother, I've mended your clothes. The hands she deliberately had extended towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were cut into countless pieces of flesh, and she was very happy. The invisible threads around Luo Qingtong were rapidly revolving around his eyebrows. No one knew what kind of terrifying power the threads of the thousand silkworms would display in this kind of situation. Didn't those people from the Red originally the weapons that the thousand silkworms relied on to survive? Clothes? Many magical beasts and humans who were stronger than them have died under their threats. Looking at the bright smile on the young man's face that even the threads were displaying an even more terrifying Ming raised his eyebrows and reached out his hand to use any of her own strength. Okay. Luo Qingtong said and handed the clothes in her hands to Yi Qianming with a smile. Yi Qianming unfolded the clothes in his hands and looked at the sleeves that were almost poked into a sieve. He was silent for a while. You've mended it? The fate of this sleeve was simply too tragic. But Yi Qianming noticed the clothes in his hands that were still separated from the sleeves. This woman just gave it to him like this. Was she trying to renege on her promise? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows slightly and snorted coldly as he looked at Luo Qingtong. Of course not. This way, it's mended. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she reached out and cut the other sleeve of the shirt in Yi Qianming's hand symmetrically. This time, the 2 sleeves of the robe were cut short. When Luo Qingtong made her move, she didn't forget to cut off the part of the other sleeve that was torn by her. Both sleeves would be the same, short. Yi Qianming looked at the clothes that had suddenly changed from a long robe to a short robe. However, because the style of the clothes did not match, it looked neither fish nor fowl. The veins on his forehead throbbed. This woman. Is this what you mean by mending? He gritted his teeth. She had cut off the sleeves of his robe, leaving his arms bare. Was this considered mending? Yeah. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a smile and said with a sly and proud face, You didn't say what you wanted. What do you think? I even helped you change the style of your robe. Is it okay to make it like this? Brother, I'm very sincere. As Luo Qingtong said this, the smile on her face became more cheerful. She was truly a genius. Who said that mending clothes could only be done by sewing. She had cut off the sleeves on both sides and changed it into another style of clothing. It was considered mending. This was a good idea that Luo Qingtong had thought for a long time just now. At this moment she felt a burst of joy in her heart and looked at Yi Qianming with a happy face. Yi Qianming looked at her proud and sly expression and really tried to restrain himself. In the end he couldn't help but pull her into his arms. Chapter 2606. He gritted his teeth and said word by word. He was almost angered to death by Luo Qingtong. But soon he seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled up. Then he looked at her and snorted, "Since you've done so well, I'm not a stingy person. Let's forget about what happened last night. You can continue to stay here tonight." When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong almost choked on her own saliva. What? She looked at Yi Qianming with a dumbfounded expression. She didn't expect things to develop like this. She had solved the problem of the clothes. Shouldn't she not have to stay here tonight and continue to sew clothes? Why didn't this man play his cards according to the rules? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was even happier with Luo Qingtong's dumbfounded expression. He let this woman be so proud. He finally shot himself in the foot, didn't he? Yi Qianming suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought of such a reason. It seemed that the effect was surprisingly good. He snorted and looked at Luo Qingtong's expression. What? You don't want to? Do you feel that your clothes aren't mended well? Yi Qianming put emphasis on the word, not good, and paused. He raised his eyebrows and snorted, since that's the case, then you can continue to mend clothes. In short, she could choose between mending clothes and sleeping. When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Damn, when did Yi Qianming become so difficult to deal with? Luo Qingtong listened to his words and really couldn't refute. In short, no matter what, she still had to stay here tonight. Luo Qingtong deeply suspected that Yi Qianming was doing this because of last night. No, it was very likely that he was taking revenge on her for what happened last night. Otherwise, why would he suddenly ask her to sew clothes? After she found a way to get away with it, he didn't let her have an easy time and asked her to continue to stay in this tent. Luo Qingtong didn't believe that Yi Qianming didn't see that she wanted to leave here and sleep elsewhere. If*ck he had really shot himself in the foot. If he had known earlier, Luo Qingtong had known this for a long time, but she didn't know where to start. He had done too many bad things in the past. Was this his retribution? Luo Qingtong was really speechless. She was the first person in history to have been tricked by him so miserably. I got it, she mumbled. She was already thinking about what she should do to make herself more obedient tonight. She really couldn't stand the stimulation of sleepwalking and molesting Yi Qianming every night after she fell asleep. She was hiding her identity. Did his body have to be so unreliable? If this continued, she really wouldn't be able to hide her identity no matter how powerful she was. She really didn't want Yi Qianming to know her identity on this abandoned continent for the time being. Luo Qingtong's heart was tangled. However, Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was already thinking about how he should let this woman molest him tonight. Should he continue to leave kiss marks or let this woman tear his clothes? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy and the curve of his lips became even wider. While he and Luo Qingtong were having a battle of wits and courage, having fun, a few days later, boom. Chapter 2607. Along with this violent explosion in the distant sky, there was a lot of hustle and bustle, as well as a thick cloud of smoke. The smoke swept away the decaying spiritual qi in the sky above the abandoned continent. The boiling and roaring aura revealed absolute vitality and incomparable power. It's the power of the heart of the continent. Chu Xiaofeng and the others rushed out of their tents when they sensed the rising power. Yi Qianxian also appeared in the sky above their tents. He looked at the center of the rising power in front of him. That was where the heart of the continent stopped and opened this time. This vigorous and powerful power was the remnant power of the great Tao left behind by the heart of the continent. It was precisely because of this vigorous force that this continent, which should have been abandoned, was able to nurture the Tianluo grass again. The other withered and corroded spiritual herbs were able to radiate new vitality. Master, this power seems to be very different from the rest. Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others appeared beside Yi Qianxian and whispered to him. Since all abandoned continents were already decaying and were about to die, the remaining power in the heart of the continent would definitely not be this strong. After all, it was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If there were no special circumstances, The final outcome of those abandoned continents that had already reached the end of their road, without exception, would be the complete exhaustion of the vitality in the heart of the continent. Then they would disintegrate in the starry sky, turning into dust and air. However, the power emitted by the heart of the continent was unusually tyrannical and powerful. It was hard to believe that this was an abandoned continent that was about to disintegrate and scatter into the starry sky just by looking at the intense power of the continent's core. Instead, it seemed like a supercontinent that was at its peak, filled with vitality, and was about to evolve and evolve again. Yes, that's indeed the case. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He looked at the heart of the continent. The power of the heart of the continent gave him a completely different feeling. This was not a power that the heart of the continent, which was about to die, could possess. There must have been something that they had not expected to happen in the process. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a situation when he came to the abandoned continent to get a stalk of Tianluo grass to stabilize his injuries because he couldn't find Luo Qingtong. The thing in the heart of the continent was definitely not simple. This trip to the sky Luo grass would not be so easy. However, Yi Qianxian wasn't particularly worried. At worst, he would just reveal his true identity and strength. To Yi Qianxian, the reason why he had concealed his identity in every possible way was not because he was afraid that the people of Tiandu would come looking for him. Instead, he didn't want them to cause trouble on his way to find Luo Qingtong. Moreover, if he was busy dealing with them, how would he have enough time to look for Luo Qingtong? There was also the hidden danger of his heavenly veins body, which was indeed troublesome. But that was all there was to it. Now that Luo Qingtong was by his side, he was not afraid of the people from Tiandu. As long as Luo Qingtong could cure the hidden danger in his body, even if Emperor Tiandu came, he would not be afraid. Chapter 2608. He would let that woman misunderstand him for the time being. Yi Qianxian really liked how Luo Qingtong cared about him and protected him. It warmed his heart. Moreover, that woman was so cunning and willful. She was Luo Shaoqi, so she was unusually obedient because she didn't want to expose her identity. Yi Qianxian hadn't had his fill yet. How could he let her know the truth so soon? His face darkened when he thought of how she used to make him jump in anger, but he couldn't bear to punish her. This time it was time for him to collect some interest and gain back some face. As Yi Qianren thought about it, she snorted and turned to look at Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong was also looking at the scene in the sky. The power of the heart of the continent was rising. Luo Qingtong wasn't as strong as Yi Qianxian and the others, who could see that the power of the heart of the continent was different at a glance. However, her blood-red eyes were spinning. She could tell that something was wrong from the analysis of the power. The power of the heart of the continent was too strong. It was far more powerful than the power of the heart of the continent emitted by ordinary abandoned continents. The heart of the continent was so powerful. Could it be that there was some kind of treasure hidden in the heart of the continent that caused such a change? If that was the case, then their group had really made the right choice by coming here. Luo Qingtong knew that if there was really such a treasure that could make the heart of the continent, which was about to die, emit such a terrifying power, then its value was far beyond ordinary treasures. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if news of this treasure were to spread, not to mention the Chu family and the Lian family, even the big families and forces of the three-star domain and above would come. However, the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan had coincidentally sealed off the news of this abandoned continent, so no one else knew about it. This treasure would most likely be theirs to take advantage of. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up at this thought. But soon she saw Yi Qianxian's gaze and the smile on her face immediately disappeared. Oh my god, she did not know how to face Yi Qianxian anymore. These days, Luo Qingtong had been living in an abyss of suffering. Her sleepwalking was so bad that it made people's hair stand on end. Luo Qingtong woke up every morning in Yi Qianxian's arms. There was even one time when she tied her hands and feet together. When she finally woke up, Luo Qingtong was horrified. Her lips were less than a centimeter away from Yi Qianxian's lips. She was so close to kissing him. Oh my god. Was she that thirsty? Yi Qianxian, on the other hand, coldly told her that she had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night and said that she wanted to bite him to death. The man narrowed his eyes. I was curious how you were going to bite me to death. In the end, you woke up. Yi Qianxian's voice was calm, but Luo Qingtong felt like dying. Oh my god. This bite was not a bite at all. Luo Qingtong was certain that if she hadn't woken up in time, she would have pounced on Yi Qianxian and bitten him left and right. Oh my god. Even with her hands and feet tied, she couldn't stop herself from defying the heavens. Chapter 2609. Luo Qingtong's heart was indescribably tangled, but she didn't notice that Yi Qianxian's eyes were dark as he stared at Luo Qingtong's slightly swollen lips. This woman woke up faster than he expected. Fortunately, he pulled away in time and made up an excuse. Otherwise, they would have been discovered. In the next few days, no matter how many methods Luo Qingtong thought of, even if she desperately wanted to move out of Yi Qianxian's tent and stay in her own tent, when she finally woke up, she would still appear in Yi Qianxian's tent. This time it was even more outrageous. She directly slept on Yi Qianxian's body. On his body. Meeting Luo Qingtong's shocked gaze, Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent, and his tone was indescribably innocent. I was sleeping well in the tent, and you ran back on your own. You still insisted on sleeping in my tent. There weren't enough beds, so you climbed up on your own. You even cried and pulled and refused to leave no matter what. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the two sides of the wooden bed, where Luo Qingtong's fingers had left fingerprints due to excessive force. Looking at the 10 fingerprints that fit perfectly with her fingers, Luo Qingtong was on the verge of breaking down. She actually ran back to Yi Qianxian's tent, cried and pulled and refused to leave? Luo Qingtong completely couldn't imagine that she would do such a thing. But the truth was right in front of her eyes. These 10 fingerprints were clearly her own. And she appeared in Yi Qianxian's tent. It couldn't be that Yi Qianxian carried her over, right? In fact, it really was like this. After Luo Qingtong fell asleep, Yi Qianxian carried her over. After being together for so long, Luo Qingtong had long been accustomed to Yi Qianxian's embrace. So when Yi Qianxian picked her up, not only did she not wake up at all, but she also snuggled into the man's embrace to make him more comfortable. The 10 fingerprints on the wooden bed were also pressed by Yi Qianxian when he held her hand. With his strength, it would be a piece of cake for him to leave these 10 fingerprints on Luo Qingtong's hand. There wouldn't be any leakage of energy or aura to wake Luo Qingtong up. After doing all this, he was satisfied and fell asleep with Luo Qingtong in his arms. As for the wooden bed that had suddenly become narrow, he had asked Bei Qing and Feng Yu to redo it. After all, Luo Qingtong was no longer sleeping here. The bed didn't need to be so big, right? As for Luo Qingtong running back to sleep with him, he didn't know at all. Yi Qianxian had planned everything so that Luo Qingtong could leave the tent to sleep elsewhere. Luo Qingtong didn't know anything. She had always thought that Yi Qianxian didn't discover her identity. Naturally, she didn't think that Yi Qianxian had plotted against her. She thought that it was her own fault. After all, she did want to get close to Yi Qianxian, so she tried every possible way to live in his tent. She completely believed that she would do something to Yi Qianxian after she fell asleep. If that wasn't the case with Luo Qingtong's scheming mind, how could she have fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap? As the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. This time Luo Qingtong had fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap. At this moment, when she saw the man looking at her, she suddenly looked up at the sky and pretended that she didn't know anything. Last night, she had almost torn Yi Qianxian's clothes. Chapter 2610. Last time, when she'd failed to kiss him, Yi Qianxian had found an excuse for her to bite him to death. This time she'd failed to tear his clothes. Could it be that she wanted to freeze him to death? Luo Qingtong felt that such a retarded excuse wasn't something that Yi Qianxian would believe. Even she couldn't bring herself to say it. It was an insult to her intelligence. Just as she was feeling depressed and conflicted, Chu Yuqing and the others saw the storm of energy in the sky and were pleasantly surprised. Ha! The heart of the continent has opened, and the heavenly grass has appeared. This heavenly grass will definitely be ours. Chu Yuqing and the others felt an indescribable sense of certainty. But soon, his expression turned ugly again. It's a pity that we didn't get rid of that bastard Chu Lingfeng before this heavenly grass appeared. Otherwise, we would have one less major problem in the fight for this heavenly grass. But it's good that he's not dead. Chu Yuqing sneered. Even if Chu Lingfeng had told them that he tried to assassinate Chu Lingfeng, no one would have believed him. And even if someone did, so what? There was no evidence, and there were no clan elders present on this abandoned continent. It was impossible for Chu Lingfeng to cause trouble for him. All he had to do was kill him in the fight for this heavenly grass. And in the fight for this heavenly grass, crooks and honest folk would be mixed together. There would be both the Chu clan and the Lien clan. As the number one member of the Tianfeng Chu clan, Chu Lingfeng was bound to be targeted by the opposing Lien clan. When the time came, Chu Yuqing would join forces with others to make a move against him. Perhaps Chu Lingfeng would take care of the Lien clan for them, and then die at their hands. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Killing two birds with one stone. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he felt very pleased with himself. Quite a few members of the Tianfeng Chu clan had already gathered around him. Among them were the top members of the 6th Elders and 9th Elders factions. They had no choice. First, the 6th Elders and 3rd Elders factions were on good terms. Second, Chu Tianming had participated in the operation against Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but when Chu Yuqing had ambushed Chu Lingfeng, they'd been nearby as well. Under these circumstances, the 6th Elders faction had no way to extricate themselves from this matter. They said that this matter had nothing to do with them, so they could only cooperate with Chu Yuqing. As for the 9th Elders people, they were on good terms with Madame Xing and had long been secretly siding with Bai Xing. This time they had received Bai Xing's orders to help Chu Yuqing in secret. Now that Chu Yuqing's ambush had failed and Chu Yufei had also been caught up in it, they had no choice but to act. No matter what, he could not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. In addition, Chu Yuqing had also contacted the two ambitious elder bloodlines of the two families. At this point, more than half of the Tianfeng Chu clan's 9 great elder clans were on Chu Yuqing's side. Chu Yuqing had originally thought that with this lineup, finding and killing Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be a problem at all. But who would have thought that Chu Lingfeng would evaporate from the abandoned continent in the past few days? No one could find even a shadow of him. He'd clearly been seriously injured, and his bloodline power had been exhausted. Even if it was to recover his strength, he should have come out to find a way. But in the end there was no news of him at all. Who knew where the hell he was hiding? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.